want to thank each and every one of you for coming out here tonight to arm yourselves with knowledge about a tool that's being covertly used to usher in what Adolf Hitler and George Bush termed New World Order, and that's mind control. I've enjoyed talking with quite a few of you earlier this evening pertaining to how mind control has affected some of you or some of your loved ones. Mind control is very prevalent in this country and around the world. These criminals that are in control of our country operate on the philosophy that secret knowledge equals power. Many government secrets and personal reputations were staked on the belief that I could not be deprogrammed to remember those things that I was supposed to forget. They were wrong. For as intelligent as these perpetrators are, they're limited in their thinking by their own immorality. They don't have wisdom, they don't think deep, and they never considered the strength of the human spirit. They never considered what would happen when a good man like Mark Phillips gained knowledge of their secrets and used them to restore a mind rather than control one. I know that I'm extremely fortunate to have survived my CIA, MK Ultra, White House, Pentagon level, trauma-based mind control victimization. Now that I'm in control of my own mind and ultimately my free will, I'm telling everything that I witnessed and saw and heard and photographically recorded behind the scenes of this New World Order effort. By telling their secrets, their power is eroding. I also speak out to give voice to the many, many mind control victims and survivors out there who can't think to speak out and tell what they know and what they've endured. I speak out for the sake of my daughter, Kelly, who's now 16 years old and is a political prisoner in the custody of the state of Tennessee, where she's being denied any rehabilitation due to the political affluence of her abusers. She's counting on Mark and I to get this word out on her behalf. For Kelly's sake and for your sake, Mark and I have gone to great lengths to document the facts and the truths that are listed in our book, Transformation of America. Transformation of America is self-published, uncensored, so that you can have the facts that you have a right to know and a need to know. These truths have been covered up and kept from all of us for a long time under a blanket of so-called national security. This is the same blanket of national security that has prevented us from obtaining justice despite the extensive evidences and documentation we have. We have over 27,000 documents and evidences. Government insider testimony, medical records, more than enough evidence for any legal procedure in this country, including congressional. But this blanket of national security has stopped us from obtaining justice. It's time for truth to prevail. It's time that these truths were brought to light for the sake of humanity as we know it. I'd like to begin by defining mind control by my experience. I realized that my experience was extreme, that the extensive, total robotic, absolute mind control I endured is more limited than the kind of mind control that's proliferating in society. Mind control has kind of a sliding scale where you've got the total robotic mind control on one side, and you've got mind control that's proliferating, such as in occultism in this country, Or Global Education 2000, where children are losing their freedom of thought and their ability to critically analyze. There's so many different aspects of society that are affected by mind control in varying degrees. It's imperative that this information get out. And as I explained, my victimization, it certainly can be applied to all different facets of mind control and mind manipulation. And as Mark and I have heard so many, many times from people who have read the book and heard us speak out, that this is a thread that's tying things together. All of a sudden, this whole new world order is making sense. The erosion of constitutional values, the erosion of morality in this country, all of a sudden, it begins to make sense when we learn about mind control. I was born in 1957 in Muskegon, Michigan, to a multi-generational incest-based family. This means my father was sexually abused as a child, my mother was sexually abused as a child, and they were sexually abusing me. My father sexually abused me as far back as I can remember, and I've often heard him state that he began substituting his penis for my mother's nipple while I was still an infant. I tell you this so that you can understand that my sexuality was confused in infancy. It was put into an area of my brain that's much like survival, like eating and drinking would be. I tell you these facts so that you can be better armed and understand what's happening in society. And name names. Mark and I name names in our book, Transformation of America, not so that I can say, well, I was in the White House with so-and-so. I mean, I missed the whole glamour part, but this is so you know who the problem is and where these problems lie. The sexual abuse that I was enduring was so horrific that I developed dissociative identity disorder. This used to be termed multiple personality disorder, and I'm so glad they've changed it to dissociative identity disorder because it really more aptly describes the compartmentalization that occurs when a person endures trauma that is literally too horrible to comprehend. Even though I couldn't understand that what my father was doing was morally wrong, the pain and the suffocation of his abuse was so extensive that I developed dissociative identity disorder. It certainly was incomprehensible. There was no place for it in my mind to deal with such horror. Therefore, I developed a compartment in my brain, a little area behind amnesic barriers that was actually the neuron pathway shutting down in my brain in order to compartmentalize the memory of abuse so that the rest of my mind could function normally as though nothing had happened. So if I'd see my father at the dinner table, I didn't remember sexual abuse. But as soon as he unzipped his pants, the part of me, that part in my brain that knew how to deal with that horrific abuse, the neuron pathways actually physically opened up so that that part of my mind could deal with my father again and again and again as needed. I certainly had a lot of experiences within that compartment that dealt with my father's abuse. But I didn't have a full range of perceptions. I had a very limited perception, a very limited view. Therefore, I'm so glad it's not termed personality anymore. I developed another compartment in my brain to deal with my mother's abuse. Her abuse was primarily psychological. She suffered from dissociative identity disorder herself, and I don't hold her accountable for her actions the way that I do my father, who is fully aware of what he was doing. My mother, in spite of her inability to control herself, destroyed any remnants of self-esteem that I might have developed. And her abuse was so horrific that I developed another compartment in my brain just to deal with my mother. I developed another compartment to deal with the child pornography that my father was subjecting me to. He was earning his living as a worm digger on a 6th grade education and supplemented the family income with child pornography that was being distributed through the local Michigan mafia pornography ring. At that time, there's a criminal faction of our government that was interested in targeting children such as myself for mind control. Because this compartmentalization of memory was something that they deemed ideal for keeping government secrets. After all, if I couldn't think to remember, how could I tell about it? Additionally, people who suffer from dissociative identity disorder develop a photographic memory behind those amnesic barriers, because the brain has a defense mechanism that when trauma occurs, it photographically records events surrounding trauma. And an example of this would be that many of you who are old enough to remember, when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, most people know exactly where they were and what they were doing, because this was an event that traumatized the nation. And this exemplifies how the mind photographically records events surrounding trauma. So behind these amnesic barriers, I had a photographic memory, which the government deemed ideal for programming. That way I could deliver messages to and from government leaders, or in my case, also drug lords, who were involved in funding the black budget and funding the New World Order controls. They're interested in programming me so that I would deliver the messages verbatim. When I delivered messages, I delivered exactly what I was told, using the voice inflections of my abusers, with no conscious comprehension of what I was even saying. It was just a tape recorder just parroting out exactly what I'd been told. Another aspect that the government was interested in is that as a dissociative identity disordered person, I had no concept of time, because I was going from compartment to compartment of my brain with no memory of what had happened before. Therefore, I had no ability to even keep track of time, and a concept of it was just absolutely impossible. And it also makes for, if I didn't know what I was doing earlier, I wouldn't know to be tired while I was overdoing something else. Therefore, a person who suffered from dissociative identity disorder had extensive physical endurance, just superhuman strength and ability to keep going and going and going and going. Dissociative identity disorder persons also develop 44 times visual acuity. Very often that's why you see them wide-eyed with the whites around their eyes, because they're actually taking in more of their surroundings than the average person. 44 times more detail than the average person sees. That certainly makes them perfect marksmen for mercenary operations or for intelligence in different areas that the government was interested in developing mind control. I was a chosen one, or a prime candidate, for mind control because of the sexual abuse that I had endured. My sexuality had been enhanced. Therefore, I was used as a sex slave and also delivered messages to and from these government leaders. At that time, because the government, this criminal faction of our government, was so interested in dissociative identity disordered persons, they knew that any child that was subjected to child pornography had to have endured trauma so horrible that they had to be suffering from that disorder. Therefore, this criminal faction of our government sanctioned this child pornography ring so that they could identify and target children such as myself for the project. At that time, the politician, local Michigan mafia politician, the politician who was protecting this Michigan mafia pornography ring was a guy named Gerald Ford. This is the same Gerald Ford that went on to become the first unelected president of the United States. Gerald Ford, I never perceived his political affluence. I only perceived him as another abuser like my father, because Gerald Ford also sexually abused me as a child and sexually abused me right on through my mind control victimization until Mark rescued my daughter Kelly and I in 1988. Gerald Ford is not a pedophile per se. He's what I refer to as trisexual. He'll try anything. Any age, anybody, anytime, anywhere, just as long as he had control. Because he had a perversion of power. in addition to his interest in mind control. Therefore, it was Gerald Ford who came out to our house and explained to my father how to raise me in the project according to government specifications. My father had been caught sending this child pornography through the U.S. mails, and therefore he was approached and told that if he sold me into that project, that he would gain immunity from prosecution. My father remains free from prosecution to date for so-called reasons of national security. My father thought it was just absolutely wonderful and immediately sold me into the project. He felt like the government condoned child abuse. So did I. I certainly felt like the government did. And my father went on to have 5 more children to raise in the project, so there were 7 of us in all. The rest are still awaiting freedom. Once my father agreed to sell me into the project, I was taken routinely to Mackinac Island, Michigan, which is a political retreat where the Michigan governor's mansion is located. It was a bohemian grove of sorts where politicians met and discussed New World Order controls, where they discussed mind control of the masses, mind control in the school systems, how to use occultism as a trauma base. One of my sexual abusers at that time was the Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Trudeau. Pierre Trudeau is a professed Jesuit. Now, the Jesuits are an intelligence arm of the Catholic Vatican. There's a criminal faction within these Jesuits. I'm certainly not saying all Catholics are bad, nor am I saying all C.I.A. is bad or all politicians. There's good and bad in everything. But nevertheless, Pierre Trudeau represented this criminal faction of the Catholic Church, of the Jesuits, who believed in mind control of the masses because they wanted to be the one world church in the New World Order. The money that was being brought in through the church was funding New World Order controls. And he firmly believed in mind control. Another sexual abuser of mine was then Michigan Senator and later U.S. Congressman Guy Vanderjagt. This is the same Guy Vanderjagt that went on to head the Republican National Committee that put George Bush into the office of president. It was at Mackinac Island, Michigan, when I was 13 years old, that I was dedicated to the senator who had become my owner in this mind control project. That's U.S. Senator Robert C. Byrd. Senator Byrd is a Democrat from West Virginia. And again, as you'll notice as I reveal any names, that this doesn't have anything to do with party lines. Democrats and Republicans both are involved because it's not about party lines, it's about who's for the New World Order and who's not. Nevertheless, Senator Byrd had been in office as I've been alive. He's still in office today. He's been head of our Senate Appropriations Committee, which means he held the purse strings of our country. He decided where money would be spent. And I know from having witnessed and experienced and saw so much behind the scenes that Senator Byrd was appropriating money in directions that would allow for New World Order controls. Not only that, but my father, for having sold me into this project, was granted a lucrative military contract for making camshafts for military automobiles and all. My father became extremely wealthy on his 6th grade education. Senator Byrd, as my owner, would decide where I should go, when, what operations I would be forced to carry out during the Reagan-Bush administration, what places I should be taken specifically for mind control programming. Senator Byrd directed all of my activities. Also around that time, I'd made my first communion in Muskegon's St. Francis de Sales Church. Having made my first communion, I also endured an extra ritual after that was referred to as the rite to remain silent. That's R-I-T-E, as in ritual. This involved Congressman Vanderjagt and the head of our church at that time, a Father Don. And they subjected me to an occult blood ritual. This was so horrific. It was this reversal of the Catholic Mass. It confused my mind because when a person's operating on a subconscious level because they're so traumatized that consciously there's no place for what they're enduring, the subconscious mind has no ability to discern and to question and to reason the same way that the conscious mind does. And this reversal of the Catholic Mass into occultism just made it all seem to run together in my mind. It was absolutely horrific. This blood ritual was so horrible that my mind readily accepted the mind manipulation that I endured afterwards, a hypnotic language, the neuro-linguistic programming, mind-controlled programming that actually changed the way that my brain was functioning, so that, you know, that part of my brain that I said would open up to deal with my father's abuse again and again? They changed that so that they decided when, where, and how that particular compartment of my brain would be opened and accessed. And they replaced the triggering mechanism with hypnotic codes, keys, and triggers, hand signals. There's also phone tones that can also open those neuron pathways and give access to the compartmentalized memory as well. But they replaced that at that time. And this was with this right to remain silent. I also had a silence in my head after that, because up until that time, I heard, it was just my own voice, but I heard my voice arguing back and forth with all these different perceptions and from the different compartments in order that I could formulate some kind of a decision about things. I remember before the right to remain silent that I had some free thoughts of my own, and I had hoped for a place in the world where people didn't abuse each other. I'd hoped to have 10 children that I knew would be at least 10 children in this world that weren't abused. I'd hoped for those things, but with the right to remain silent, I lost my capacity, my ability for free will thinking. I lost my ability to even hope anymore. I lost all free will entirely. This right to remain silent silenced this argument that always went on in my head, and instead, all I ever heard from that point on was the voices of my abusers directing me, telling me exactly what it was I was supposed to do. I could only robotically follow those instructions and carry them out. By the time I was ready for high school, Senator Byrd ordered that I be sent to Muskegon Catholic Central High School. At that time, there was an enormous emergence of information. The Catholics had long since learned the effects of trauma on the human mind. They'd learned it and kept records of it for so many years, with such things as the Spanish Inquisition and other aspects where people who didn't follow the belief systems were wiped out. The Crusaders had also recorded a great deal of information pertaining to trauma on the human mind. This information was being merged with the Hitler-Himmler research that the CIA had taken and had been advancing on. The combination of the merging of the information was very powerful. And Muskegon Catholic Central was a place where this information was being brought together. It was at Catholic Central that the very basis, the very groundwork for Global Education 2000 was being implemented. This is Goals 2000, outcome-based education. There's many different names for the program that's being implemented in our school systems. It's being forced on our children by the federal government. Global Education 2000 was designed to increase our children's learning capacity while decreasing their ability to critically analyze. That way they would just readily accept whatever they were told without any question and just take all the information in. At Catholic Central, I got straight A's. I did really good in school because I was photographically recording everything in class. I endured occult ritual in the school chapel, as did numerous other students in the school. I certainly wasn't the only one. As a matter of fact, by that time, I really thought the whole world was involved in this kind of abuse. By then, my whole environment was saturated with it. This occultism, this trauma, created the photographic recording of all that I learned in school. Of course, I had no ability to critically analyze it or to creatively use it in any way, but the information was sure in there. It was while I was at Catholic Central that Gerald Ford went into the office of president. I had been conditioned by that time to believe that I had no place to run and no place to hide. This is a phrase that's used to lock in mind control victims of varying levels. There's no place to run, no place to hide. We're watching you. I certainly felt like I had no place to run and no place to hide. Who would I turn to? I couldn't turn to my parents. I couldn't turn to my church. Couldn't turn to my school. Couldn't turn to the local politicians. And now I couldn't even turn to the President of the United States. I truly felt locked in, which is exactly what they wanted for total control of my mind. Of course, since then, I've learned otherwise, and Mark wisely taught me while I was in the deprogramming process that I did have a place to run, so right at them. And I had no need to hide. Obviously, they do, by the way. They're covering up all their acts with the national security blanket. After I graduated from high school, Senator Byrd ordered that I be transferred to Nashville, Tennessee. Nashville, Tennessee was heavily involved in mind control at that time through the country music industry, and above all, the proliferation of C.I.A. cocaine operations within the country music industry were already in full swing. The political corruption in Tennessee was just all the way to the top. The country music industry provided a cover for mind-controlled slaves like myself to be taken around the country to the various places as designated, and also to distribute and deliver the large quantities of C.I.A. cocaine that was coming into the country. It was my experience that the CIA's so-called war on drugs is no more than the CIA eliminating their competition as they take over the drug industry worldwide. They took their war on drugs to our street corners and turned our streets into a bloodbath. The country music industry provided the cover for distributing the cocaine, so Senator Byrd wanted me to be within the country music industry. Besides that, he fancied himself an entertainer of sorts, and he fiddled on the Grand Ole Opry from time to time. When I was first sent to Nashville, he was playing on the Opry that night, and he had a musician behind him, a guy named Wayne Cox. Wayne Cox later told me that playing music behind Senator Byrd wasn't the only way that he backed him, but that he backed him politically as well. After the Opry that night, I endured an occult ritual again. Occultism is oftentimes used as a trauma base for mind control. Who can comprehend that kind of a trauma? Blood ritual is absolutely horrible, and it's a perfect trauma base for mind control, for the compartmentalization of memory. I witnessed Wayne Cox murder a railroad bum down at Nashville's Union Station. It was abandoned at that time, and there were bums around, and he shot him right between the eyes and cut off both of his hands, which was Cox's MO for murder. After this blood ritual, this horrible trauma, I was programmed that Wayne Cox would be my first handler in MK Ultra mind control. As my handler, Wayne Cox would follow Senator Byrd's directions and instructions, and above all, he would be subjecting me to more trauma sufficient to satisfy the numerous compartments Senator Byrd wanted developed in my brain for mind control programming so that I could carry out various operations during the Reagan-Bush administration. I endured numerous occult rituals after that. Wayne Cox at that time was working directly under the direction of Louisiana Senator J. Bennett Johnston, and he took me to his hometown in Chatham, Louisiana. J. Bennett Johnston at that time was heavily involved in mind control operations because he was running a band of mercenaries out of Louisiana. At that time, this band of mercenaries were going in and out of South America. There was a lot of arms deals going on. There was, and most importantly, when the airplanes would fly these guys down to South America, they would come back full of cocaine, which was being distributed on our streets. Wayne Cox was triggering these mercenaries into operation by showing them a severed hand from another one of his victims, which re-traumatized them into the occult ritual that they had already endured and accessed a specific compartment of their brain. And he told them that J. Bennett Johnston wanted them to give him a hand and carry out a certain operation. He would then give the instructions and the guys would follow him through. So J. Bennett Johnston was heavily involved. At that time, it was 1978, and it was determined that I had endured sufficient trauma to carry out my first trial run operation. An enormous quantity of cocaine had been flown in on one of these operations, and I was to deliver it into the neighboring state of Arkansas. By that time, Bill Clinton's drug operation was in full swing. He was governor of Arkansas, and I delivered this cocaine to a remote airport in Ouachita Forest, which I've since identified as Mena Airport. I also delivered a little packet of information and a small quantity of cocaine, a personal stash from J. Bennett Johnston, to Bill Clinton. I delivered it to Bill Clinton, and he cut out 2 lines of the coke, and he did inhale. That certainly wasn't the only time I saw Bill Clinton using cocaine. My sexual experience with Bill Clinton was extremely limited, in spite of the fact that I was a sex slave. It was my experience that Bill Clinton is bisexual, leaning far more towards a homosexual end. All I've ever seen him involved in was a homosexual activity, with very limited experience with him myself. Whereas my experience was much more prevalent with Hillary Clinton, because Hillary is also bisexual, leaning more towards a homosexual end, and it was she who accessed my sex programming to fulfill her perversions. Around this same time, J. Bennett Johnston subjected me to some other mind manipulation that involved, instead of an occult theme, an alien theme. Now these guys who are manipulating my mind and programming me for mind control purposes claimed, and these criminals in control of our country as well, claimed to be gods, demons, and aliens, in order that I feel totally helpless, in order that I felt like they were beyond my realm to affect. And it certainly worked at that time. J. Bennett Johnston told me that he was an alien. He told me that he had been part of the Philadelphia experiment, and when the ship disappeared, it came back a spaceship. This is in keeping with kind of an air-water mirror theme that NASA uses quite frequently, a reversal, because, again, the subconscious mind doesn't have any reasoning capacity. J. Bennett Johnston then showed me, through his office at General Dynamics, a then top-secret stealth. Here was this triangular stealth that wasn't in any of the school books, wasn't being talked about anywhere, wasn't out in the newspapers or anything else. It was being withheld. It was still a top-secret weapon system. But I saw this triangular stealth. It looked like a spaceship to me. I'd never seen anything like that. And everything that J. Bennett Johnston was doing and he was involved in certainly was alien to me. So it was easy for me to accept the idea that what was happening was in fact being perpetrated by aliens. I'm not saying that there's no such thing as aliens. That would be foolish for me to even say anything like that at all. But what I am saying is that it was my experience that these were people claiming to be aliens. If there's a reality out there pertaining to any alien influence, we need to sort out the government misinformation and disinformation and mind manipulation techniques that they're using. I know for a fact that the plan is to make all of us feel totally helpless, that what's happening is beyond our realm to affect because we've been taken over by aliens, that our Independence Day is dawning. So beware of that. Understand that those criminals have been keeping information and technology from us under their blanket of national security. They are 25 years ahead of us at least, technologically. Can you imagine what they've got now? 25 years ahead? What's happened that you're aware of in the last 25 years? Microwave ovens, we've got computerization, and they've had access to all of that to continue their own advancements. They're way ahead. So when they say, it's aliens, and they show us some incredible technology, don't fall into the trap of feeling totally helpless, that this is beyond our realm to affect. Superstition begins where knowledge leaves off. And they have been keeping knowledge from us for a long time. People have all kinds of belief systems. And I'm sure each and every one of you has various and different belief systems as well. Regardless of what your belief system is, it is imperative that you know that these criminals are people. They are within our realm to affect. They need to be held accountable for their actions and their crimes against humanity. It was 1980 and my daughter Kelly was born. She was born directly into the MK Ultra Mind Control Project on a much higher level, a more sophisticated technological level than I was subjected to. In addition to trauma, she was subjected to harmonic mind control programming on NASA installations literally since birth, before her brain even had a chance to form. As soon as Kelly was born, Senator Byrd figured I'd been traumatized enough by that time and ordered that we be transferred back to Nashville, Tennessee to carry out operations during the Reagan administration. But being within the country music industry, we had a second handler. His name was Alex Houston. Alex Houston is a ventriloquist, stage hypnotist in the country music industry. Above all, he carries out criminal covert C.I.A. operations that fund the black budget. And this certainly included bringing in large quantities of cocaine and distributing them through the United States, Canada. He was working at that time and provided a cover for me to be taken throughout the United States, Canada, Mexico, and the Caribbean for these criminal covert operations. As my handler, he took me to various military and NASA installations for mind control programming for specific operations that I was forced to participate in. These operations that I won't have time to get into tonight are detailed in our book, Transformation of America. And they involve such leaders as the President of Mexico at that time, De La Madrid, and Vice President Salinas. It was my experience that in 1984, there's a C.I.A. trauma base, near-death trauma center that's located in Lampe, Missouri. It's called the Swiss Villa Amphitheater. And they'd bring certain involved country music acts in to bring large quantities of cocaine or bring the cocaine out for distribution, because Lampe, Missouri is just across the Arkansas line and is very much a part of Bill Clinton's cocaine operation. And it was in full swing at that time. It's also interesting to note that this Lampe, Missouri operation is where the country music industry was more conveniently relocated, you know, right there in Branson, so that it would be closer to Clinton's cocaine operations. Lampe, Missouri was a place where I heard George Bush and Bill Clinton talking, where, from the point of view I had, they certainly were friends, and they didn't recognize any party lines between them. That's something for the, you know, a smoke and mirrors illusion for the public. It's not something they adhere to, because they had exactly the same agenda, and that was for bringing in this New World Order. I heard George Bush talking at that time. He was talking to Bill Clinton, and I've since photographically recorded it and wrote it verbatim in our book, that when the American people became disillusioned with Republicans leading them into the New World Order, that Bill Clinton, as a Democrat, was going to be put into the office of president. This was decided in 1984. Actually, I'd heard about it even prior to that, but that, as of 1984, they were already discussing it as an absolute fact. It was also discussed in the groundwork for NAFTA that by the time George Bush went into the office of president, that Salinas was going to become president of Mexico, and they together would be bringing in the NAFTA, which was the beginning of New World Order controls. I was forced to participate in the criminal groundwork for NAFTA, the opening of the Juarez-Mexican border to the free trade of drugs, free trade of our nation's children. It's absolutely appalling, the criminal roots of NAFTA. Again, this is detailed in the book. But it's interesting to note that these political moves had already been decided way back when. And as I deprogrammed, and as I was, it was really something to me to find out people didn't know about this stuff. I mean, it was so obvious to me. I didn't realize that people were unaware and had bought into some kind of smoke and mirrors illusions of what was going on and never thought to look behind the scenes to what was really going on. But I understand good people don't think that way. They don't have criminal minds. They don't think to look for that kind of criminal activity. Just like these guys are limited in their thinking by immorality, good people are kind of blinded from that kind of criminal activity until their eyes are open to truth. But this criminal activity that was going on at that time, the people that were involved were following directions from George Bush. I don't purport to know it all. I don't purport to know that George Bush is at the very top of all this, but he is as high up as I knew. It was my experience that Ronald Reagan answered to George Bush, not robotically, not under mind control, but willingly, because George Bush was respected for what he knew about bringing in the New World Order. Consider his past. George Bush first began with the United Nations. Then he went on to head our CIA. Then he ran our country through 3 administrations that I'm aware of, the Reagan administration, his administration, and the Clinton administration, because Reagan and Clinton both answered to him. Mexican President de la Madrid answered to him and knew that Salinas was to be coming into power, and Salinas had more influence in Mexico at that time than de la Madrid, that, as far as my experience was concerned. Also, Saudi Arabian King Fahd followed orders from George Bush, as did the Prime Minister of Canada, Brian Mulroney. In 1983, I heard Ronald Reagan and Brian Mulroney discussing the New World Order. Senator Byrd had acted in the capacity of a pimp and prostituted me to Reagan, and I was present at this White House cocktail party. Now, Ronald Reagan certainly provided a wonderful smoke and mirrors illusion for all of us. For those of you who don't want to believe that he's involved in this, he told you he's an actor. And he did a real good job of it for a long time. That was his role. That's what he was supposed to do. Nevertheless, I heard Ronald Reagan telling Brian Mulroney that he believed the only way to world peace was through mind control of the masses. I know from experience there's no peace of mind under mind control. And I wonder at a world peace where people don't have peace of mind. Mind control, the ramifications of mind control are far-reaching, because I also know that under mind control there's no free thought. Without free thought, there's no free will. Without God-given free will, there's no soul expression. What kind of a world peace can we have without any free will or any soul expression, without any spirituality? Mind control needs to be exposed in order that people maintain their freedom of thought, in order that people maintain their free will and have that spiritual expression, because of spirituality, when people have soul and spirituality, they're going to be acting in a capacity of love anyway. That is where world peace is, not in mind control. By 1988, I'd been forced to participate in numerous operations against my will, all of which I certainly would never have done. I guess if I had had any part of me that was willing to do anything like that, mind control would not have been necessary. I'm appalled at what I was forced to participate in, but I am relieved that this information's getting out, that people are passing the book Transformation of America hand in hand, hand to hand, so that hand in hand we can take back our country. This information is information that you have a right to know and a need to know, and their controlled medias are not going to suppress truth. Truth prevails. In 1988, Mark rescued my daughter Kelly and I. We couldn't think to escape. I couldn't think to save my daughter any more than I could think to save myself. And all those childhood hopes and dreams were certainly hadn't come to fruition. When Mark rescued Kelly and I, we didn't have any ability to even hope for good people. We didn't know they even existed. We didn't have a capacity to trust anyone. It wasn't within our realm of experience. I couldn't think to reason that Mark was a good guy. But I'd seen him with his animals. And even though I didn't have any ability to consciously reason, and Kelly didn't have any ability to consciously reason things out or to think things out, we had this extra sense developed. We sensed things very strongly. After all, when you consider that we use, 10% of our brain, we'd been like blasted into other parts of our brain, and these parts of our brain were real perceptive on what's considered, I suppose, psychic levels by some definition. When we had a sense for things, kind of like the animals did. And we noticed that the animals loved Mark. He had these raccoons that he'd rescued. He had 3 raccoons, and they all loved him, and they hugged him, and they wrapped their arms around his neck, and they patted on his face and kissed him. And, you know, that was really a neat thing for us to see, because we had only seen our animals abused. We lived on a farm. We had lived on a farm, and we had dogs and cats and horses and cows and guineas and chickens and all kinds of animals, all of which Alex Houston tortured or killed to keep us in line to, you know, if we didn't do this, this would happen to our pet. And we loved our animals. Please bear this in mind, that people who abuse children oftentimes abuse animals. If you see someone abusing an animal, keep your eyes open, look further, make sure those kids are safe. I've never seen an exception to this rule. Not that there's not one out there somewhere, but I've never seen an exception to it. So it was very telling to us that these animals loved Mark. Additionally, when he came in and rescued us, I mean, here we were under the gun of the C.I.A. Everything was very precarious, to say the least. I was 30 years old. I was supposed to be killed, as most mind-controlled slaves are at the age of 30. Besides, I was considered too old for sex by that time, so I was supposed to be wiped out. But Mark came in and rescued me from certain death and rescued my daughter from a fate much worse than death, and took the time to rescue our animals. He packed up all those cows and horses and guineas and chickens and loaded them up on these different trailers and everything and brought them to safety as well. This had a profound impact on Kelly and I. We certainly developed an ability to trust right there and then. Mark took us to the safety and serenity of Alaska. Since we were safe for the first time in our lives, experiencing love for the first time in our lives, memories of our past began flashing on our mind's screen. As these memories flashed, and I started to remember what had happened to me and to my daughter, particularly during the Reagan-Bush administration, I became enraged. I was enraged at what my daughter had been through, the tortures I'd endured, and what the plan was for humanity as a whole. I'd have been blinded by that rage, immobilized by that rage, if it weren't for Mark's wisdom in telling me that the best revenge is total recovery. Because through total recovery, by photographically recording all those events, I could expose these people for exactly what they are, for what their plans are, for what I witnessed behind the New World Order. Be able to get help for my daughter, who was in desperate need of help at that particular time. So I began writing out my memories. By writing out my memories, I used a different part of my brain than verbalizing. It bypasses emotion. Bypassing emotion was very necessary for logically making the incomprehensible comprehensible, for understanding and grasping what had happened to us and what could be done with that information. Kelly was not so fortunate. Because of the harmonic programming that she'd endured, remembering the traumas and deprogramming the program did not allow her access to all parts of her brain as it did me. She still needed some technological equipment to help her recover. She needed to actually have those neuron pathways vibrated back open with harmonic equipment. Therefore, she went into Humana Hospital in Anchorage, Alaska, in an intensive care unit. She suffered horribly at that time and responded only to some psychological intervention and not to any conventional medications. Kelly was actually suffering respiratory failure because mind control has advanced to the point where they know the ins and outs of the brain and the mind so well that they know how to program not only the subconscious, but to go into the primitive mind, the very area of our mind where blinking, breathing, and circulatory, heartbeat, all that is regulated. And they could go in there and put death programs in place. In my daughter's case, it was respiratory failure, so that in the event that she ever had cause to remember, which they never expected could happen, but in espionage, that can happen. We've heard of that, where the brainwashed and where they have the memory accessed. So they wouldn't have to take the old cyanide pill anymore like they used to, like spies used to. Instead, they would just simply go into respiratory failure, circulatory failure, and no information would be released at all. There was no chance of the information getting out that way. Since my daughter was being raised was genetically and mind controlled, being brought up to be in espionage, she had that program in place and it went into effect. Because of the medical attention that she needed, she was She became quickly thrust into the illegal and immoral custody of the state of Tennessee, where she remains today. The violations of laws and rights that proliferated in her so-called legal case were extensive. We had one clean district attorney that went in and told the judge that he was violating constitutional rights and human rights in my daughter's case, and cited law after law after law, and the judge interrupted him and said, but laws do not apply in this case for reasons of national security. This certainly raises a question. What does national security have to do with a documented, validated, and proven rape and molestation of a child's mind and body? For Kelly's sake, and the sake of so many other mind control survivors out there, we need to lift this veil of national security. We need to repeal the 1947 National Security Act. This is a national security that's threatening the security of our nation when it covers up such crimes against humanity as mind control, when it covers up the C.I.A.'s so-called war on drugs, when it covers up the selling out of our country to New World Order controls. That's a national security that has nothing to do with the security of our nation. This national security has kept information pertaining to mind control for all of you for far too long. We've got to get this information out. We've got to arm others with knowledge on mind control, because knowledge is our only defense against mind control. We need to get this information out in detail so that we can all be more effective in our particular areas of taking back our country and ultimately taking back our world, for Kelly's sake, for the sake of all the other mind control survivors and victims that I know are out there. There's many, many of them. And for the sake of humanity as we know it. It is truth that sets us free. Please help us spread the word. Thank you.
dedicated on the way of trying to stop phenomenal fascism. And I spent some of my investigation report by now by working on various topics. One of them was the Kurt Wilhelm topics, which took 7 years of my life and very deep research in reality of World War II and cover-up of one of the biggest Nazi war criminals who also made a big career. Mind control programming also made my interest, and I'm very delightful today, ladies and gentlemen, to present you the people, the victim of the program, Cathy, who I'm enjoying today her hospitality in her sweet home in Tennessee, and Mark Phillips as the person who saved Cathy's life. And my very first question is to Cathy O'Brien to tell us a few words about when she gets involved in that M-Code project and how old you were there when you started with that.
I was born into a multi-generational incest-based family, and my father was sexually abusing me from as far back as I can remember, and he often bragged that he was substituting his penis for my mother's nipple while I was still an infant. And my father had created a dissociative identity disorder by his sexual abuse. Dissociative identity disorder used to be called multiple personality disorder, and it's defined as the mind's sane defense to trauma that's too horrible to comprehend. Even though I couldn't know that what my father was doing to me was wrong, nevertheless, the pain and suffocation that I suffered from his sexual abuse was horrific enough to create the multiple personality disorder. And it was the multiple personality disorder, dissociative identity disorder, as it's more aptly called now, is why I was a chosen one, or a prime candidate for the government's C.I.A. MK Ultra mind control project. My compartmentalization of memory was something that they were very much interested in. And by the time I was 6 years old, my father had been using me in child pornography and was caught sending this child pornography through the U.S. mails. When this happened, he was approached by the head of the local Michigan mafia, who was also heavily involved in Michigan politics and U.S. politics, Gerald Ford, the same Gerald Ford that went on to become president of the United States. Gerald Ford came to my father and offered him immunity from prosecution if he would sell me into the project. My father thought it was a wonderful idea. He felt like the government sanctioned his child abuse, and he went ahead and sold me into the CIA's mind control project.
Tell me something. I was talking with various people about Gerald Ford, and then I was discussing with various people on that topic. What is if you will say, proves that Gerald Ford could be involved in child pornography and being a member of organized crime? Is there any significant proof that you know of or you can recall of? Because you was following his career, you met him in even your 20s, and when you was 30 even, Gerald Ford. How do you know about his career of being so?
Gerald Ford, if I might introduce this in, Gerald Ford has got a reputation among members of law enforcement, Park Service, even we understand persons who have contributed information from Secret Service and the Treasury Department have all made comments to certain members of Congress with regards to Gerald Ford's activities and his proclivity to some really strange and bizarre sexual habits. It's been well known throughout the elite inner social circles in Washington, D.C. and about that Gerald Ford has been involved with organized crime since his very beginnings in politics. You know, his wife, Betty Ford, became a chronic drug and alcohol abuser. And as a matter of fact, he capitalized on that by opening up what is known as the Betty Ford Center in Palm Springs, which supposedly and does treat alcohol and drug addictions. in the stars and the elite social persons, both in the United States and abroad. But Gerald Ford's reputation, although not established certainly by Cathy with photographs of him with children or adults or anyone else, his reputation is extraordinarily well documented and well known by a lot of politicians and certainly law enforcement that has come forward with supporting documentation.
When you're talking about supporting documentation, are we able to get some information on that or to get some copies of that?
We have verbal support from certain members of the federal law enforcement agencies, like, and I'm saying like, not that, but like the FBI, who have agreed in part to testify before Congress if we are able to get a legitimate investigation into Cathy O'Brien's claims. Now, there is an FBI officer by the name, formerly an FBI officer who was head of the office in Los Angeles, California, the FBI's office there. His name is Ted Gunderson. Ted Gunderson has discussed Gerald Ford's reputation and some medical reports that Ted Gunderson is familiar with from clients who have reported being abused by Gerald Ford. So Ted Gunderson is outspoken, he is retired, and he is one of the very few that is able to talk about this at this time.
So obviously I will be able to get him. I know Ted Gunderson very well, and
Sure.
I met him a few occasions, and I will be able to get some more information on that topic.
Yeah,
But
hard proofs are very hard to come by when it concerns a former or president of the United States. It's very difficult to come by hard proofs because as quickly as you display them, they're taken away from you for reasons of national security. So hence the reason that we are unable to provide for your viewing audience hard evidences, because we are using those hard evidences that we have acquired in hopes that we can present them to Congress and have something done very formally on this.
Come back to Cathy, to you. You was mentioned that Gerald Ford went to your home and he introduced himself. Was he there in the capacity of, how you said, member of organized crime, dealing with pornography, and how he get in that time in contact with such sophisticated CIA operations like mind control?
Well, my
Or it was his
father,
private business before to be an organized crime?
it had been his business for some time, which is how my father was doing the child pornography during my earliest years. But my mother was also multi-generational incest-based. She suffered from dissociative identity disorder, from child sexual abuse. And her brother, my Uncle Bob Tanis, also of the Muskegon, Michigan area, was very much a part of this abuse, and he was definitely a connection between my father and Gerald Ford. My Uncle Bob Tanis was U.S. Air Force intelligence and also claimed to be working for the intelligence arm of the Catholic Vatican, which is the Jesuits.
So in other words, we'll be getting some information from that aspect of the. So Mark, why the child abused people? I mean, children like Cathy, were the objects for such mind control, and how you as an expert could describe that?
Luke, we need to go back in history just a little bit. In the 30s, Adolf Hitler was researching two methods for obtaining control of the world. First of all, through nuclear devices, which would, in essence, destroy the victory of his spoils of victory, and also through mind control. And what Adolf Hitler had discovered was that the children of Northern European witchcraft-based families that were involved in Satanism and other forms of blood trauma, ritualistic type abuse, very commonly found in Catholicism and some other types of Christian belief systems. He found that there was an interesting phenomena that was occurring with the children. the children that had been abused literally since birth had developed some extraordinary senses visually. They had 44 times visual acuity improvement. In other words, they could see practically in the back of their head. He could envision using that one thing alone for his special SS forces. In addition to that, he also found out that these children had developed photographic memories, and along with a host of other psychological as well as psychiatric changes that seem to occur when people are exposed to horrific abuse. He took those studies, or actually had a fellow by the name of Heinrich Himmler, began to delve deeper and deeper into the research until he formulated a plan to literally genetically encode these children through interbreeding among these incest based families. I guess plainly spoken, these people were abused, therefore they abused their own children, and their children abused their children, and you develop generation after generation of these abused children, which of course grow into adults. What we have found is that our government, the United States, became interested in it about the same period of time. Our intelligence officers that were serving in Germany at that time began feeding us information back that Hitler was going to breed a super race. And inside this super race was going to be a nucleus of individuals that Hitler or somebody else could have absolute control over. Now, these people would have high IQs, much higher than the average person, and it was not so much that they were smarter, it's the fact that they had been abused since birth. Cathy O'Brien's IQ is above average. Most of the people that we're dealing with here, their IQs are much higher than average. And this is as a result of not the interbreeding or the multi-generational effect. It has something to do with the abuse that she incurred. Her brain literally was forced to use more and more of itself until she has developed some incredible, but not so incredible characteristics, such as photographic memory.
This, from my perspective, it was like a compartmentalization of memory where the abuse was compartmentalized in a certain part of my brain so that the rest of my mind could function normally as though nothing had happened. And I believe that's why it's termed the mind-sane defense to trauma too horrible to comprehend. But this compartmentalization has amnesic barriers around this photographic memory. And it was this compartmentalization of memory that the government was very much interested in and utilized throughout the Reagan-Bush administration in particular for me to be programmed to carry out specific criminal covert operations, which they wanted kept secret, as well as to deliver messages verbatim to different government leaders that were involved in implementing the New World Order through mind control of the masses.
I have a question. I present your case to the various editors of big magazine in Europe and also editors of the various publishing houses. They found a big interest, but at the same time I faced quite a skepticism because of the fact that something what is very well known to you, and you're talking very spontaneously, was a very difficult topic for them to comprehend, and that's why I'm here today to give them more details and more accurate information and details regarding those topics. When you're mentioning that it was used first for sexual purposes, can you tell us the beginning of your sexual abuse and what is your recollection on that? Who was the first abusers that you faced in your childhood, and gradually how it's turned on to your other kind of utility they found for you, which is also sending messages and dealing with drugs?
So that my primitive behavior had been confused when my father was substituting his penis for my mother's nipple, because my sexual experience went into a realm of innate survival instincts such as eating food would do. And my father was my first sexual abuser. And from there, he prostituted me to various local policemen, local Masons, local politicians, such as U.S. Congressman Guy Vanderjagt, who later went on to head the Republican National Committee that put George Bush into the office of president. But my Uncle Bob Tanis was also one of my primary abusers from a very early age.
My next question is the involvement of implementation and how the Nazi came to this country. You was lecturing over 30 times in various communities, including police, right?
Yes. We've spent the last 5 years, Cathy and I have been lecturing with primarily psychiatrists, psychologists, mental health caregivers, and of course state, federal, and as well as local police groups all over the country. We're entitled to teach in 11 states for continuing education credits for these particular persons. And to answer your question about where all these scientists came from, the United States government had in 1947 started a Project Paperclip. Project Paperclip was the importation of Nazi and fascist scientists that had scattered after World War II out of Germany and Italy all over the world. And we were bringing them together and bringing them over here. We had propulsion scientists and we had mind scientists or psychiatrists.
You have in your library, I saw the other day, the book written down about that, right?
Yeah, a lady in Washington, D.C., who's a very prominently well-known reporter for the Washington Post, I believe. Her name is Linda Hunt. She's been a Washington correspondent for many years. She did the actual research into the Freedom of Information archives and actually came up with the information on Project Paperclip. And people like Werner von Braun, the more notable ones that most people know about, propulsion scientists that helped actually build NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, from the ground up. He, along with a lot of other scientists, were brought to this country over a 43-year period of time. And they were secretly placed in our learning institutions, our colleges, universities, excuse me, and into major corporations, research labs, as well as NASA and the Defense Department.
If you mentioned over 43 years, means far behind the World War II.
Yes, yes.
Is it explain some kind of putting these two nations together in a way, Germany and the United States?
I don't think they ever separated. As a matter of fact, I'm not saying this flippantly, but I don't believe that Nazi Germany lost the war. I believe they just had to move their operations from their country to this country.
You mentioned the other day, and it was about to go to this place in the state of Alabama, place where the NASA center is, and the place where you mentioned is a home for a lot of Nazi scientists. What's the name of the place? And
Huntsville, Alabama is the home of the NASA rocket propulsion group of scientists. And NASA is about 100 miles from Nashville, Tennessee, where we are now. And NASA has become the home of an enormous number of German scientists, many of whom have had new identities supplied to them. They've had complete changes done in their histories so that they cannot be found as to who they actually were. Well, most of those scientists that were involved in mind control and rocket propulsion during the 40s and 30s under Hitler's regime are now either dead or they're retired. They're old, very, very old. But their children who took their places are, in fact, working at the facility in Huntsville, Alabama, known as NASA.
But also a lot of war criminals from Germany that didn't have any involved in any research got their home here.
Yes, the ones that are still living are still, many of them residing in the Huntsville area.
Oh, very interesting phenomenon. I was involved myself in a long process of getting Kurt Waldheim file to trial, and I met people even in Justice Department, one very, I call them Don Quixote's organization among Justice Department,
Yes.
who was tracing this war criminal with a lot of problems. And one book just came out recently, 2 years ago, called Betrayal, by Alder Rosenbaum, who was head at the time of the Justice Department Criminal Division's Special Investigation on War Criminals, and he was describing what kind of trouble this organization had by tracing these criminals even in the United States, which looks very unusual, but not unusual after I hear your story.
Well, that's true. Of course, when Linda Hunt did her book, she too ran into a number of obstacles with the Justice Department. She ran into, like you have, cooperative members, as well as people who tried to deter her from her research. Now, most of this research has, of course, been declassified, or most of the information that the research was based upon has been declassified and is available if someone is willing to dig it out. Well, she did.
Well, that's a very interesting phenomenon. Now I'm living in the States. For me, living in for some period of time in communist pressure, I was very happy to come to the country which I thought is epitome of democracy and freedom and everything that we're hearing on a daily basis by most American politicians. Now we are facing one phenomena of having people who call themselves patriots, who call themselves people very scared for the future of something that they call World War Order, which was just as verbatim said by George Bush, which reminds a lot of people in Europe of the New World Order, which was done by Adolf Hitler. How you put these two things together?
Well, what we're concerned about is that mind control is being used today, as it was in Nazi Germany, as a tool of New World Order. You know, Adolf Hitler was really the second person in history to mention the fact that he thought that the only way that this globe or humanity would survive itself would be through a one world order, a singular government headed by a singular person. Well, Adolf Hitler wanted to ensure that that singular person be in absolute control. So he thought that by having human beings, that he could totally manipulate their minds externally. In other words, his puppets, or the people like Cathy O'Brien, people who had been conditioned from birth and trained from birth to accept orders and to act on those orders without any social conscience. These are the ones that Adolf Hitler envisioned would be his puppets of control for the world. Well, the first person, I might add, was Nero in Rome, and Adolf Hitler was second. George Bush was the third person in history to stand before society and say the words New World Order. But mind control, Vuk, is only a tool. It's just simply a tool and an indicator, a social indicator, of what all of us can expect in the not too distant future, unless this information is released to the public where it belongs.
Cathy, you mentioned in your part of the book, which was very interesting for various people that I was introducing your book to, your knowledge, because you was a person inside. And I will ask you something that people don't have in your book, because you're not a professional writer, and there's maybe your first book that you're writing, and I hope not the last one. Can you give us some more accurate details about your knowledge of people that claim to be World War Order? You met a lot of people. You was in the White House. You was in various military bases. Can you tell us some more information how you can determine those people that claim themselves to be a member of that order?
There was an organization that was referred to as the Order of the Rose, and this was an elite group that was at the very top of what I was aware of for the implementation of the New World Order through mind control of the masses.
Should you not mention the United Nations just recently adopted the rose as their official flower?
This Order of the Rose, by everything I know, was attached to the United Nations. George Bush, of course, began with the United Nations. He continued his work in the United Nations through his good friend and associate Madeleine Albright. Madeleine Albright is now our UN ambassador, or not our UN, but the United States' UN ambassador. And this Order of the Rose was not so much another organization like we hear about, like the Illuminati or the Masons or something like that, but instead was used as an indicator to each other amongst those at the top that they were involved in implementing the New World Order through mind control of the masses. George Bush was involved in the Order of the Rose, and Bill Clinton was involved in the Order of the Rose.
What is your personal contact and contents to that topic? You met with people personally. You saw them wearing various symbols, which remind people of that rose colors and everything else.
Yes, they would wear a rose as an indicator to each other that they were a part of the Order of the Rose. And
when it's happened and how you describe that? When you saw that particular phenomenon?
For example, at the White House, I was at a White House cocktail party and during the Reagan administration, and...
Do you remember the year and the members, anything like month and something like that?
It was, I believe, 1985 to 86. And at that time, the Prime Minister of Canada, Brian Mulroney, was brought to the White House. He was being honored at this particular cocktail party. He wore the rosebud on his lapel to indicate that he was a part of this Order of the Rose.
You saw him, you personally, at that party? It
yes,
was some
I
kind
did.
of a closed party, closed society, without presence of the journalists, I believe, right?
I'm not aware of any journalists that were there. There were quite a few people that were at this particular cocktail party. Not all of them wore roses. The ones that did certainly indicated to me, since I knew, that they were part of this Order of the Rose.
Who was there on the party? Who was
George
in the party?
Bush, Madeleine Albright, and Ronald Reagan, Senator Byrd, to name a few.
One interesting thing, there was a presidential helicopter that crashed in the state of Maryland in 1993, I believe in June of 1993. That was a helicopter that Bush used with some frequency. And one of the odd things about it was, instead of having the presidential crest embroidered into the seats, it had a rose. Now, Cathy O'Brien had reported a rose that was embroidered into the leather seats of a helicopter in 1990 to the FBI when she gave her testimony. But it wasn't until 1993 that we actually got corroboration of that through a news report when a presidential helicopter actually crashed with, of course, no one in it of any importance as far as politically goes. But nevertheless, the helicopter did crash, and photographs of the seats were taken.
So the photographs available?
Yes, yes.
Yes, and the rose indicator was, that I saw in George Bush's helicopter was black. This black rose was an indication of death. The red rose was an indication that I would be used in sexual mode for prostitution purposes. The white rose was an indicator that messages were being delivered. When baby's breath was surrounding the rose or the rosebud, it was an indicator that my daughter Kelly was usually involved in that particular operation, which meant that she was going to be sexually abused as well.
These were her cues. These were visual cues that the person delivering them would be privy to, Boog, but no one else.
And these, in the course of using these particular cues, they would simply touch the rose to access a particular program message or to program one in. That wasn't all that it took to set the program. There was so much that was done at the onset, so much trauma that I witnessed that had caused my mind to be primed for accepting program, and this base program was already laid. From the base program, other programming, specific programming, the delivering of messages was then added, or the particular sexual perversion that had to be fulfilled was added. And then they were ready to be accessed, and when it was time to be accessed, they would simply touch the
You just
rope.
mentioned that you was testifying in front of FBI.
Yes.
What kind of testifying was that we're talking about?
In 1989, I brought forward the diaries of her controller or handler, Alex Houston, because these diaries contained a number of large cash transactions among high-ranking officials, both within the Justice Department, in the entertainment business, as well as some politicians, including...
Cathy, you have in front of you a list of the people that you collected after your recollection of everything that happened after you was rescued by Mark Phillips. People that you can say and swear the member of the Rose. Can you give me this list and tell me what people are on that list? And you also having a list of all drug traffickers that you was acquainted with. You met them and you work with them.
Yes, this is a partial list that I've compiled. It was just a matter of listing some names for convenience purposes for people investigating. And I refer to it as a perpetrators list because these are certainly traitors of our country that are involved in implementing the New World Order under this group that they refer to as the Order of the Rose. And the orders from the Rose were orders from George Bush. That's not to say he was the very top person in this effort, but he certainly was in this, the aspect of it that was going on in our country, Canada, Mexico, and throughout the Caribbean. One of his primary people that was working under him in the UN capacity was Madeleine Albright, and Madeleine Albright was part of the Order of the Rose that was involved in the Caribbean operations, and even had an office in the Organization of American States office in Washington, D.C.
You visited her. Can you tell me more details how you came in touch with her? And you told me that she also sexually harassed you in that office at the time. Can you tell me approximately the time frame and when it happened and when you visited, and who brought you to this meeting with her, and what was the purpose of the meeting?
This was in, I believe it was 1985. I have a little more difficulty with exact dates and times because as a programmed multiple, in essence, it was as though it were one long day to me. I was not aware of time, my age, or anything else, but Madeleine Albright was at the White House cocktail party that was being thrown for Brian Mulroney, Prime Minister of Canada, who is also Order of the Rose. And
main purpose for you being there was what?
Was for prostitution to Brian Mulroney at that time. But anytime I was in Washington, D.C., it was usually multi-purposed, as was this particular trip. And after having been prostituted to Brian Mulroney that
Can you explain me the situation in more details? Who brought you there, and what was the room that was used for that reason? Also in White House, or he was guest in White House? He slept in White House?
Yes, he had a room in the White House at that time, and I was brought into a White House cocktail party for the purposes of making contact with Brian Mulroney for prostitution later that evening in his room in the White House.
His room? Can you describe this room?
It was one of the nicer guest quarters that they have in the White House, and it was actually a suite. It wasn't just a bedroom. There was an outside room to it that had a sofa in it and some comfortable furniture. But also in that room, by the time I entered, were 3 other girls, one of which was a very dear friend of mine who remains a dear friend of mine to date. She is a mind-controlled slave of U.S. Senator Arlen Specter. She's not free at this time. She is amnesic of most of the events, and she's anxiously awaiting the day that someone will be able to rescue her from her ongoing mind control existence.
What is her name and where is she located now?
For her safety, I will not say her name or her location, but I will say that she has flashes of memory at times. And when I was talking with her recently, she said that...
You met with her in person?
Yes, I've seen her since. She knows that the book Transformation of America has been written, and she finds tremendous hope for her and her children and for other mind control victims, that someone is actually vocalizing the atrocities that are going on in this country.
To come back to the topic of Mulrooney, so you was brought to the entrance of the White House, especially which entrance he was using for?
Service entrance. And to exemplify how the mind control slaves' subconscious is so literal, my escort, Secret Service escort, stopped outside the door and pointed out the sign that said service entrance on it to me and enunciated it quite differently so that I understood it to read, serve us in trance. And the service entrance was very often how I was brought into the White House. He took me inside and up to the room that was being used for a cocktail party. Well, actually, it's a series of rooms. It's all interconnected where you walk from one right on into.
It was during the Reagan administration, right?
Yes.
President Reagan.
Reagan was president at the time, and...
Mrs. Reagan was not there, or she was there?
Not that I saw. She wasn't... I never had any association with her, and didn't see her around at all. But,
so who brought you there? I mean, just Secret Service, but who was your mind control operator at the time?
At the time, my handler was Alex Houston. Alex Houston was the one who was part of the country music industry, which was the cover for our travels that brought me wherever I was ordered to go. U.S. Senator Robert C. Byrd was my owner. And as my owner, Senator Byrd directed my activities. He's the one who told Alex Houston to have me in specific places at designated times. And on this occasion, it was Senator Byrd who ordered that Alex Houston bring me to the White House. And also, because I had other business in Washington that I would have to be tending and mind control programmed for at that particular time. So Alex Houston had brought me to Washington and left me off with the Secret Service, who escorted me into the White House and to the rooms, the series of rooms where this particular cocktail party for Brian Mulrooney.
So there was, you spent all night in bed with him and having intercourse with him, or?
Not all night, just until he was sexually gratified, and then I left from there and was with Senator Byrd, as was so often the case.
What do you mean by you was with him after you slept with him as well?
Yes, very often there were a series of men that I would have to sleep with have sex with in one particular night. But as a sex slave, there was no personal interaction, there was no conversation, there was no keeping me around for any purposes. I was simply there for sexual gratification purposes. And that was the case on this night. As I was going through this cocktail party, George Bush and Madeleine Albright were also present. And George Bush signaled me to come over to he and Madeleine Albright and talk. And it was there that Madeleine Albright ordered that I would be brought to her OAS office the next day.
So she said that you mentioned in your book, I remember the page 167 even by heart, that George Bush told you about Margaret Albright. Who is she and something like that.
Well, yes, he made some jokes to the effect that she was the, quote, Reverend Mother of all sisters, which cryptically meant that she ordered mind control slaves such as myself around. And that particular cryptic language was indigenous to the Catholic Vatican, the Jesuit mind control aspect of my victimization. So the Order of the Rose and the Catholic influence that I was experiencing at that particular time put me into the Catholic Jesuit mode of operation that I had been previously programmed for and conditioned for, and was often used for carrying out particular Caribbean operations.
And now your second meeting with her was in that building that you was mentioning before. Can you
Yes.
describe the building and her office and how it looks like and how this event had happened?
Well, the OAS building is located in Washington, D.C., and Alex Houston dropped me off out front. I went through the front door, and there's like a hallway that goes all the way through the OAS building and right out to the back where there's a rock garden. Her office...
How the garden looks like? There's some elements you can describe?
The rock garden had a little walkway, like a sidewalk, where people who work there, people who were brought in, could go outside. There were different rocks, some trees and shrubs there, and a lot of Caribbean art was around the woodwork. I noticed that there was some Haitian artwork in particular that I recognized from having been in Haiti on operations so many times.
So you was first probably, you went through the guard there and who told you where you're going, right? And first somebody asked you where you're going, or...
No, I just went straight in. I already knew where I was supposed to go, and I'm sure that the different indicators that I was wearing was a tip to many that I was part of the C.I.A. operations anyway. I, too, had to wear the different roses, and particularly in my hair. But I had been given a little red rosy cross when I was first brought into the Order of the Rose.
Could you just keep this, what you was talking yesterday, and I just want to be curious if you can tell us on camera that. You went to her room and she was sitting there, right? And she was...
Yes, after
what's
we
happened
talked outside and I had received my orders, she brought me back into her office, which is located near the rock garden, and it's on the left as you go in. The office was really quite small, but it too had some of the Caribbean art on the walls. Some Haitian carvings were around the room. There was a file cabinet. Overall, it was a relatively small office because it was not her main office. But this OAS office was directly connected to the United Nations, and anytime I was around Madeleine Albright, the Catholic Jesuit aspect was accessed and used, and she accessed my sex programming at that time and made me perform oral sex on her before leaving.
So how long was this action? So what she did was she just take her clothes off and order you to order oral sex on her?
Well, actually, she just removed her panties. She was wearing a dress at the time, a longer skirt, which was more suitable for summer. It was a summer type weather anyway, and she just removed her nylon panties and had me perform oral sex on her while she sat in her office chair. And
was she excited with that? Did she have orgasm?
Yeah.
You can think of. How long you stayed there in her office?
As long as it took. I really don't know how long it was. Any time for something so disgusting is too long. But it was just until she was sexually gratified, and then I was just ordered to leave.
So what kind of order did she give you in that particular moment when she met with you?
Well, she just accessed the sex program part, the same part like Hillary Clinton would use, and that was done through the sister references, particularly a twin sister reference where the sex programming had actually already been instilled, and the removal of her panties and with her spreading her legs and giving me orders was really all it took.
So in other words, you was completely automatic. So you was just because of your mind control and your robotic behavior in the time.
Totally robotic. And I had no ability to do anything other than what I was instructed or what I had been previously trained to do. And she was well aware of the fact that I was programmed and trained. She was aware of the fact that I was used in pornography with Larry Flint's Hustler magazine.
Okay, you have some magazine where you can see the photographs of you on that magazine.
Those are available.
They're available on the Larry Flint's and Enterprise and Hustler magazine. Okay, what I would like to ask you this question that we were starting this programming, this particular segment was about your knowledge of other members of the Order of the Rose. That you can. Did you give any testimony to any organization like FBI or anything regarding that Order of the Rose?
No organization like that. As a matter of fact, there are certain factions, criminal factions of the government that are involved in this. There's certain factions of CIA and certain factions of FBI, much lesser on the FBI. This was very high up in government. This is government officials such as Mexican President Miguel de la Madrid, who was president during the Reagan administration, Salinas, who was vice president and later went on to be president of Mexico.
You met him personally?
Yes.
Did you also perform your sexual...
With De la Madrid.
De la Madrid, not with Salinas.
Several times with De la Madrid, yes.
Where, in Mexico or in...
In Mexico.
In Mexico.
And other people involved were like Bill Clinton. In 1984, I had occasion to be at the CIA Near-Death Trauma Center compound in Lampe, Missouri. And Bill Clinton and George Bush were there together. Mm-hmm. To some people in this country, it seems odd that a Republican and a Democrat would be together. But in fact, their agendas were exactly the same. Their agendas didn't even have to do with the Democratic-Republican parties, did not have to do with the best interests of the United States. Their interests were this new world order. They both had exactly the same goal and the same agenda. At that time, they were conversing to that effect, and Bush said that when the American people became disillusioned with the Republican Party, that Bill Clinton, as a Democrat, would be brought into the presidency to finish carrying out this New World Order plan.
Other subject is when you was discussing, I'm recalling now the tape that you sent me to Europe, what I was showing to people that editors and some people from the various magazines that find big interest, but at the same time very big skepticism, because they don't have particular details in their topics. You was talking about this hunting field when Bush and Clinton were present. Can you tell me more particular where was happened, which plant you're talking about, and what you detailed, how you can detail that?
Well, this was this most dangerous game, as they referred to it, was a matter of human hunting. And when a mind control slave such as myself was stripped of clothes and turned loose in the woods, I was then hunted by George Bush, Dick Cheney, and Bill Clinton, among others. But they were the main ones. I do not believe that it was necessary for them to have subjected me to this form of trauma. There were so many other traumas going on at the time. My mind was already prime conditioned for mind control program. So I really don't understand it, except for the fact that they found great pleasure in this form of human hunting. And they took it from particular military maneuvers. And
which base we're talking about when you was recalling the situation when Clinton was present and Mr. Bush? Which airspace?
There's a little place called Lampe, Missouri, that's just across the Arkansas line. Bill Clinton was governor of Arkansas at that time, and his whole cocaine operation that was Mena, Arkansas was the main hub for, was bringing cocaine into this CIA compound. And this particular Swiss villa, as they called it, amphitheater, in Lampe, Missouri, was actually a CIA compound out in the woods, military fencing all around it, and mind control training center where there was high-tech equipment was in one building. There were offices in another. There were little Swiss-style villas or cabins where different officials in either the military, CIA, or politics would stay, and it would house them while they were there for either the cocaine activities, for the paramilitary operations that were going on. You know, there were black helicopters everywhere, total robotic guys that were being used in special forces.
Which special forces you're referring to? There was also another program of mind control by Delta Force,
yes.
right? Can you describe, what is your knowledge? Do you have any knowledge of that, or you met these people, and can you describe me some more of this?
The Delta Force and the Navy SEALs are an elite part of the military that is mind controlled, like the mercenaries. I'm more familiar with the mercenaries that were being trained to carry out international operations that weren't necessarily sanctioned by Congress, and they were brought into other countries, such as South America, and to carry out their orders. When in a country like that, the airplanes would then come back with the drugs in them, and the drugs were then sold on the streets here in America and really worldwide. The CIA's so-called war on drugs was nothing more than the CIA eliminating their competition and taking over the drug industry. So it was all inter-attached. It all interworked. At this particular compound in Lampe, Missouri, the paramilitary operations there were for more of the UN aspect. They didn't wear UN uniforms. They wore black uniforms, had black helicopters, and this was for implementing the New World Order and didn't really have anything to do with our actual military defense.
So there were some specific units which was probably out of control, maybe, but it was very well known to the President of the United States because he was taking part of that.
Oh, very well known, yes, and maybe not so well known even to some higher officials in the military, because this was not a routine military. It was a routine military base. It was not routine military maneuvers. It was not known to the American public. Instead, this was secret operations, and like I said, for the purposes of bringing in the New World Order.
And also, I believe, acquiring a lot of money that was paid on the street of various cities,
yes,
which was used for various operations.
Yes, it's enormous amounts of money that were brought in through the drug industry. If we had this illegally gained money actually being used for our country, we wouldn't have a national debt here. There wouldn't be any problem at all. But instead, all this money was being used for the global effort. So the money was being funneled into that. Much of it, I'm aware, was being funneled through the Catholic, like the Catholic convents, Jesuit schools, and all. The money a lot of times was being funneled right through there, through the Catholic Church for laundering purposes, and then actually put into the New World Order effort. Another one of these compounds was on Mount Shasta in California.
You were there too?
Yes, I was.
How many times you were there?
One time I was taken there.
Which year we're talking about? Which year? Can you recall the year?
December 1986. And that was when George Bush and Dick Cheney were at that particular compound and indulged in their perverse pleasure of most dangerous games.
Did you sleep with George Bush yourself?
No, never. Even though he was present when he had turned me loose in the woods, he also had turned my daughter, Kelly, loose. She was only 6 years old at the time. And later on that evening, when Kelly was brought
in California? You're talking about California?
when Kelly was brought in, she said that she had been caught, same as me, to quote her, in that so-called most dangerous game. That was to make her feel responsible for the sexual abuse that followed, and it was to make me feel responsible for it, because had we not been caught, then we wouldn't have had to have endured the sexual abuse that followed. George Bush sexually assaulted my daughter, and Dick Cheney sexually assaulted me.
So now, can you recall who brought you to this Californian-based, and can you give more details on that topic, where you was brought, how this compound looks like, and everything else, which will help us more to understand and comprehend the situation, which was probably very shocking when I was presenting it to the various media organizations in Europe.
Well, Alex Houston was making a trip across the country to California at that particular time. In California, in December of that year, during the Christmas break, is when Ronald Reagan came in, De La Madrid came in from Mexico, and it was all part of the groundwork for what's known as NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which this particular groundwork was actually the opening of the Juarez, Texas, Mexican border to the free flow, free trade of cocaine and heroin into this country. So,
but I believe also in the economy, other economy,
yeah,
not exactly the campaign.
Yeah. So that was really the primary purpose for making this trip across country to California. And en route, we stopped in the Lake Shasta area.
Who was with you?
Alex Houston, Kelly, and I were traveling by motorhome across country. And we stopped at Merle Haggard's.
Did you have a cocaine on your
Yes.
home?
Yes.
And you saw Houston delivering cocaine to various people?
Oh yeah. More often, I was the one who actually had to make the cocaine deal or load it out, because I was the slave. Why should he have to carry it? Is the way he thought. So I was usually the one that carried those large amounts of cocaine to the different warehouses, facilities, and all where the cocaine was dropped off.
Can you recall to whom you delivered the cocaine at the time, just for curiosity reasons?
Oh, many, many times the cocaine was brought to a C.I.A. drug drop, as it was referred, in the state of Kentucky. It was Diamond Tavern's resort where the cocaine was brought in. Another place was at an abandoned amusement park in Ohio, where the cocaine was dropped off. There was usually large quantities of cocaine involved in those kind of deals. Aside from that, it was just minor, hand distribution to different people in the country music industry or different politicians.
Did you have him paying you on the spot, this kind of money, or you never saw money, or how it was done?
On the larger deals, there was not money exchanged. A lot of times there were bank transactions that had occurred that I had been programmed to cover the specifics on the larger deals. On the smaller deals, there was some money that was made at that time.
Now, Mike, we have now some. One of the reasons I came here was very much to dig out some more evidence on various aspects of the story, which was very, very shocking for most Europeans. I said maybe Americans living here and being faced with the situation on a daily basis in one way or another, even that we can say that most Americans are not familiar with this vaccines happening on a daily basis in this country. You'll be showing me the book. Can you tell me the contents of the book, Mark, and what is the book all about?
Well,
yeah,
Rebecca, first of all, I'll tell you where the book came from. Alex Houston was Cathy O'Brien's handler for the CIA. He's a CIA operative, drug runner, pedophile, money launderer, as well as slave runner. And he even though he did not orchestrate Cathy O'Brien's activities for the most part, he was responsible for making sure that she was in certain places at certain times. As you all have discussed earlier, I'm sure, there are codes, keys, and triggers that are necessary for someone to know in order to access, very much like getting into a computer program, in order to access the mind of one of these programmed individuals, such as Cathy was, you need to know the codes, keys, and triggers. I was aware of this because of a general in the military that had informed me that somewhere Alex Houston must have a record book where it'll say record book on it, and it would indeed contain some of her codes, keys, and triggers. Well, I knew that Alex had a large safe in his home. Very, very old, but extremely large professional bank type safe. And I knew too that Cathy O'Brien had a photographic memory, so that if she had ever seen the combination even once, it would be recorded in her mind. But unfortunately, I was rather disturbed that she could not tell left from right, and usually, you know, so many turns left and so many turns right. Well, that did pose to be a little bit of a problem, so I just simply reversed the process. But I was able to access in Cathy's memory the actual combination to the safe. And when we opened up the safe, this book, a central record book, did indeed come out of that safe.
What means central? Is it book by some central?
Oh, I think you can buy these books. They're record books. I think you can buy them most anywhere. But like many CIA operatives, they normally stay with the same theme, and so everything on it will either say Central or C.I.A. or C.C.A. or something of that nature. But contained within the pages of this book was much more than codes, keys, and triggers. As a matter of fact, there were very few codes, keys, and triggers in here. What was important, though, were offshore bank account numbers, numbers of persons high up in politics, like Bill Clinton. And at the time that I got this book, Bill Clinton was only running for the office of president. I didn't realize that he had been destined to be placed in that office. But there are a lot of drug dealing, a lot of South African telephone numbers and bank drops. Ways to launder money, primarily, are in this book. But,
you just mentioned Bill Clinton. Can you please show me the page where...
Cathy, where is it? She can find it very quickly.
Where Bill Clinton's name is there and his telephone number was there, which I believe some people they've been using, they could be...
Yes, this one.
Let me face this with the camera. Bill Clinton. And if I could recall the number, 859 through the lens on my camera, 6641.
Correct. That's correct.
Was it number in his country home?
Yes, in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Mm-hmm. So what is it down on the top? Let me give it again because I just want to show my viewers. There was some...
It says prospective dealers, and actually what that meant in code is the fact that Bill Clinton was not a dealer, but a consumer of cocaine.
So, Cathy, you can recall, and I believe you testified on some occasions on Bill Clinton's using cocaine. You testified that you brought him the cocaine. And can you describe me this time and time frame and what was happened?
1978 was the first time that I've delivered cocaine into the state of Arkansas at Mena Airport.
With whom you was there at the time? With whom you was there?
My first mind control handler, which was Wayne Cox. Wayne Cox.
The man who as a child with you, was chosen to be your father of your child. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. And he was also involved in the mercenary operations that were under the direction of Louisiana Senator J. Bennett Johnston. And these mercenaries, as I was saying, would go to South America or wherever.
The officers of the army
and bring back the planes would bring back the drugs. This one particular airplane load of drugs was transferred into a van, driven into the state of Arkansas, and delivered to the Mena Airport area. I only knew it as a remote airport in Ouachita Forest in the state of Arkansas, and it's since been identified exactly as Mena Airport. But I delivered some cocaine directly to Bill Clinton.
What quantity were talking about? What quantity of cocaine were talking about?
Just a small personal amount at that time.
Like 1 kilo or something?
Wasn't that much. I don't believe it was that much.
So where was the place of delivery?
It was at a hotel that was right nearby there, where Bill Clinton was staying at that time.
Do you remember the name of the hotel by any chance?
No, I don't.
So it was a small hotel?
It wasn't like a conventional motel with like a Holiday Inn kind of something. It wasn't like that. It was an older stone motel.
It's actually the place that she's identified. She did so for some investigators with the Kenneth Starr Investigative Committee for Congress. And although I apologize, I don't have photographic memory recall, they did tell me what the name of the place was. It is it was at one time it was built during the 20s, and it was used for hunting, as a hunting fishing lodge, motel type of thing, but has long since been used as a retreat for various Christian groups and this sort of thing. But yes, it's in existence, and it's there in the Ouachita Forest.
We'll be able to recall this hotel when you'll be able to see this hotel now.
Right, I can
Cathy?
get photographs of it.
Now to come back to this topic, you brought there, you came in his room, right? He was there?
Yes, Bill Clinton was governor of Arkansas at that time. He was for a very brief period of time. Then later he became governor for an extended period.
How the situation was looking like? You brought him this cocaine to his room, right?
Yes. Yes, along with a message from J. Bennett Johnston, because this was from Johnston's personal stash of cocaine that he was sharing with Clinton, because it was supposedly extra good cocaine. Bill Clinton snorted 2 lines of it then, and did...
He did in front of you? He opened the package?
Yes, and told me to tell his friend Ben, as he referred to him, that the cocaine was excellent, so it was real good. So I did. That was the first time I witnessed him using cocaine, and I did have occasion to see him using it throughout the Reagan Bush administration.
So that was your first occasion that you met in person with Bill Clinton, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you testify on that to some committee or any organization like FBI or wherever?
The information was turned over to the ones that Mark just mentioned.
What was the organization? I'm sorry.
The Starr Committee. It's Kenneth Starr. He's been appointed by Congress to investigate the Whitewater, and as well as Mena, Arkansas affair. His group is rather large. They've come down with several indictments. They've already forced Hillary Clinton to have to testify.
It's an official group at the Congress. It's an official organization. Yes. And you testify together, or Cathy?
No, our testimony thus far has not been made public. This is the first even mention of it publicly.
The other reports that we did, we've turned this information over to all aspects of law enforcement.
When this testimony was taking place, exactly what time, and you have a frame time, and when this happened, which year?
The first testimony was this, along with some other physical evidence, is that Alex Houston was in the cocaine business, and that was given by myself to the FBI in Anchorage, Alaska in 1989. 1989.
Who was the person in charge that took this evidence from you?
Ken Marischal.
Ken Marischal was FBI special agent?
Yes, he was in charge at that time of that particular office. I also reported this information to the United States Customs Enforcement in Anchorage, Alaska. But since no crimes had been committed in the Alaskan jurisdiction, they were not permitted to investigate it, only to forward the information on to Washington. and to the respective areas that I was reporting where crimes had been committed. Cathy then gave testimony to the local Anchorage Police Department for the FBI on camera in 1989 with regards to Alex Houston's abuse of her daughter, herself, and in addition to that, some information regarding the drug dealing. But at that time, Cathy had not recovered her memories yet, beyond a certain point. In 1990, we also gave testimony to the United States Department of Defense Special Investigations, known as the Defense Intelligence Agency. A representative from the Huntsville, Alabama regional office came to my mother's home just outside of Nashville, Tennessee. And there Cathy gave more recorded testimony.
What is his name? If you remember?
You know, it's in the book.
Oh, I see.
But I don't recall it offhand.
We reported all these crimes to so many people, and on every turn we were stopped for reasons of national security. It's also interesting to note at that time when we were reporting these crimes that the U.S. Attorney General of the Justice Department here was Dick Thornburg. Dick Thornburg was a primary victimizer of mine. He's heavily involved in the white slavery cocaine operations. He was, at that time, governor of the state of Pennsylvania, and during the bulk of my victimization. But by the time that I was reporting the crimes of my victimization, he was the U.S. Attorney General,
wow,
which meant that he shut down the any investigations for reasons of national security from all aspects of the, especially on the federal end, from Customs, FBI, the Defense Intelligence Agency, the U.S. Army's C.I.A. investigations, really just all aspects of law enforcement that we reported to, and we went to everybody. Dick Thornburg was right in a position there. Dick Thornburg's name is also in this diary.
Yes,
Can I just
right
have
here.
it for my audience?
Is that?
Yes, this was for a kilo of cocaine that Alex collected off of him. He delivered the cocaine to him, or Cathy did, and...
Thornburg, $18,000.
yes.
So did you deliver this particular cocaine to him personally, or?
Oh yeah, there was
Many
You remember seeing him, right, personally?
Oh, many
times.
times.
She was used with him
Many
sexually.
You also have a sexual relation?
Yes.
He was, so you was having with him. Another aspect.
Oh, I'm sorry. That kid over there is agitating that dog.
This list
Cathy, you have a list of people that you, what is, how you could call this list? You have a list of the New World Order and list of cocaine handler for CIA or drug dealers. Can you tell us the
That's
substance
the
of this?
perpetrators, I think, is what she referred
Yeah, I
to.
refer to them as the perpetrators. Yes, it's an extensive list, but it's still only a partial list. And it has names like the former CIA director, Bill Casey.
He was also part of this cocaine operation?
And the white slavery. And he was one of the most integral parts of the Order of the Rose merging of the CIA and the Catholic Vatican that I'm aware of. His ties into the Jesuit aspect of this were extensive. It's my understanding from childhood and right on up through Bill Casey that the Catholic Church wanted to be the one world church. That was their ultimate goal. And when Ronald Reagan
To surpass other beliefs and just to make every church to be Catholic, in other words, Orthodox Church or...
and
What is your knowledge about that? In which respect you came to this conclusion?
well, I came to the conclusion from childhood when the former governor of Michigan, George Romney, and then Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Trudeau, were talking. Pierre Trudeau was Catholic Jesuit, and they were discussing the emergence of information back then from what the information that the Catholic Vatican had on the effects of trauma on the human mind that was supposedly stored in the Catholic Vatican. That was the first introduction to that. Bill Casey was right on up through the Reagan administration, so often I heard of this merging and how the Catholic Church would be the one world church. Ronald Reagan told Brian Mulroney at that cocktail party at the White House that we were discussing earlier, that he believed that the only way to world peace was through mind control of the masses. When he stated this, it was also a play on words, the play on the word masses. They believed that people could be manipulated through the church, because if the church leaders were delivering this, the orders under this New World Order, then the people would interpret it as information from God and supposedly do exactly what they were told to do. So it was mind manipulation in that regard, but mind control of the masses was also in reference to the populace as a whole. So it was more or less a play on words. Brian Mulroney was part of the Jesuit aspect of things, so to him it was quite humorous the way that Reagan...
How many times that he was sexually abusing you? Or how times you was actually offered to him? How many? To Mulroney?
To Mulroney on 2 occasions. He was not one of my primary abusers.
Which occasions talk about? Which, can you recall these occasions in the year frame or?
The one that we discussed earlier at the White House, and another time on the Canadian side at Niagara Falls. And
who brought you there to him the second time?
Alex Houston.
Again?
Alex Houston. It was still traveling under the guise of the country music industry. That was our cover. That was our excuse for traveling throughout the United States, Mexico, the Caribbean, and Canada.
And now, to come back to this list, you collected the names and people that you met during your time of your cover-up with drug business or drug trafficking. Can you please tell us the rest of this name that you have on this list? Can you just read for me, please?
Other names include Saudi Arabian King Fahd.
This regarding to New World Order members, right?
Yes.
Yes, these are, I can give you the Order of the Rose New World Order names. I've highlighted them on this particular list, and it's also full of particular drug lords that are not Order of the Rose, but are aware of it, such as Jose Busto of San Juan, Puerto Rico.
Start first with Order of the Rose and the people that was there, and your classification on that.
The U.S. diplomat Philip Habib, U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino, who was a primary programmer of mine, U.S. Congressman Guy Vanderjack, Tommy Lasorda of the L.A. Dodgers. He has the baseball team here that the Dodgers, they were using mind control in it. Plus, he was Catholic connected and was very much a part of the Order of the Rose. Former U.S. drug czar and Secretary of Education during the Reagan administration, Bill Bennett. Bill Bennett is very much a part of the Order of the Rose. He's a mind control programmer, and his brother, Bob Bennett, is a so-called attorney who is also part of this global effort. Saudi Arabian Ambassador Prince Bandar bin Sultan, who I understand has since become King of Saudi Arabia. former Tennessee Governor Lamar Alexander, George Bush Jr., Michael Dante, who was the chief pornographer for Ronald Reagan. In essence, what that amounted to is he did a lot of covert filming to compromise politically affluent people by their perversions from having had the films on them. Hank Cochran is a singer-songwriter in the country music industry in Nashville, Tennessee, who was one of the primary people in the CIA's cocaine operation. He's also aware of the Order of the Rose. This Order of the Rose group was a small group. It was an elite group at the very top, and it was mostly the world leaders. Aside from that, there were several people who were aware of it, but were not actually a part of it or privy to all that was going on there, such as our former Defense Secretary, Dick Cheney.
He was no member. Dick Cheney was no member of the Order of the Rose.
And not that I was aware of. He could have been, but it was not my experience to witness him being an actual part of it. There's U.S. Congressman Gary Ackerman of New York, U.S. Congressman Jim Traficant of Ohio, General Manuel Noriega of Panama was well aware of the Order of the Rose. I'm not sure whether he was actually a part of it or not. He was certainly a part of the CIA's drug operations during the Reagan-Bush administration that I was aware of.
Did you met him personally?
Yes, I have.
Which occasion you met Noriega?
The primary occasion that I met him was in December of 1987. And
where was that?
It was in Tampa, the Tampa area of Florida, which was real close to MacDill Air Force Base. It was actually just across the bay from MacDill Air Force Base, which is a very primary hub for the cocaine operations of the CIA. Also,
who brought you to him, and how you can describe this meeting with him, and can you describe where you met him and which it was hotel room or some other base?
No, actually, he had his ship out in that that harbor area. He has this enormous yacht. I guess it's actually referred to as a yacht. I really don't know where the difference would come in between a ship and a yacht. His was so big. But there was an enormous party that was going on his yacht at that time. I was brought in for the purposes of delivering a message from Ronald Reagan pertaining to his blatant cocaine activities since Iran-Contra was in full swing at that time and was very scandalous in this country and had a lot of media coverage. The orders to Noriega at that time were for him to just, be quieter about the operations, to go underground with them, and to cease, the blatant activities that he was.
Can you recall exactly what order you gave him, what kind of symbol you used for that, or language?
Primarily, what was done is there was U.S. Senator Alan Simpson of Wyoming was the director of the operation. It was called Operation Shell Game, and this was an effort to have Noriega cease his blatant activities. It was done through terror tactics, where Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino was brought onto the ship as well. I did see Oliver North downstairs while I was being taken upstairs to Noriega. There was, I was used in.
Can you try to recall this picture how you was brought to his room inside, or how it looks like?
Yes, I was given specific orders to be on a dock to be picked up by a little boat, which would take me to his yacht. This little
Who brought you there to this
boat? I don't know. Somebody that had, it would look like a little speedboat type
No,
dinghy.
who brought you there, and a person that brought you there to Florida?
Alex Houston.
Exactly. Okay.
And Alex Houston then flew off elsewhere to carry out his own business, while I was left there to carry out these particular orders.
So you gave him a message from Reagan, in other words?
Yes.
What was the message? Do you remember the message?
Yes. Not verbatim right at the moment. It is recorded in the book verbatim, though. It is in Transformation of America verbatim. My memory now, I would have to go into like a self-meditative trance to recall verbatim, and I don't choose to do that at this particular time. But the message, in essence, was that the imminent lifting of the veil over all of them from Iran-Contra was going to expose the CIA's cocaine activities if Noriega didn't cease his blatant activities now. He was told that he would be covered, that he would be protected from any exposure unless he continued on the course that he was, and he chose, I guess he chose to continue.
So you gave him this message personally,
Yes.
right? Per se, you stayed next to him in his chair or his
No,
room?
what had happened was I was brought to his yacht. I was given a coded pass key, which was a shell that was swirled into the design of an eye. It's an actual shell that's found on the beaches in that area. I presented the shell. There's also the shell of what they referred to as a baby's ear that was very traumatic, that was used to signal my involvement in this particular Operation Shellgate. That was my pass key onto the ship when I presented it. Once I was cleared the guards, and he had armed guards, Noriega had armed guards on his ship. Once I was cleared past them, I was escorted upstairs to what appears to be like a black smoke mirror windows of the very top floor, which is where I was to meet with Noriega. Alan Simpson was already up there.
So he was there present when you was there?
Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino was there. And in essence, they did a modified version of the hands-on mind control demonstrations that I was forced to participate in on the various military bases and NASA installations across this country. That was where the term presidential model came from. In essence, they were demonstrating the latest forms of mind control to people. And this was a modified version of that presentation. And this was done to Noriega to show him not only the latest technologies in mind control, but also to play on his occult superstitions. It was done to terrify him into believing that he would have the wrath of Satan himself on him if he didn't comply with Reagan's orders. He was very terrified by the whole presentation and had run hollering from the room. So the effect was definitely there. The trauma that he endured on his superstitious beliefs, coupled with the message that was delivered verbatim, including the exact voice inflections that have been programmed with, should have been sufficient to force him into containing his operations on a more subtle basis. Somehow, I don't know why or how or what happened, but apparently he didn't do it, and that was Bush's, when he went and raided Panama on the so-called Operation Just Cause, when they brought Noriega into this country. And I guess he remains a political prisoner here to date. But that was done because he was skimming profits off the CIA drug money that I'm aware of. And
how was you aware of this scheme process?
Because of the transactions that I was involved in on his aspect of this cocaine operation out of the Caribbean. I knew that the money would turn up short and that he had already been accused of skimming.
Who was about to pick up the money from him? You was in charge of that, or? At times
I was a part of that, that particular aspect. So that was how I was aware that he was already skimming. But I was also aware that more than anything, his activities were not being kept secret enough to suit the CIA at that time. They had been so blatant about their cocaine activities up to that point that they did have to quieten them down during the Iran-Contra investigation.
I see. So in which respect you was collecting money? So they brought this money through the ships and delivered to you, and you was bringing this money where?
Well, oftentimes it was part of the Caribbean operations. I would travel on the Norwegian Caribbean lines, NCL, out of Key Biscayne, Florida, that would go to various ports of call throughout the Caribbean and Mexico. And that was another means of travel for the country music industry. Alex Houston, as a so-called entertainer, ventriloquist stage hypnotist in the country music industry, would be brought onto the ship to entertain. I was brought on with him as a handwriting analyst that gave lectures on the cruise ship. And then when we were in certain ports of call, then the CIA's drug operations were carried out at that time.
Which means, can you explain it from a technical point of view?
I would have a large suitcase full of money in the early 80s. As things progressed and on into the later 80s, most was delivered as bank transaction numbers and codes instead that I was programmed with, rather than the actual physical money transfer. But early on, the money was actually taken in a suitcase to key places, Key West, Florida, for example, where the operations were in full swing there. Some into Mexico. A lot of heroin was actually brought out of Mexico during that point in time through NCL.
NCL is what?
Norwegian Caribbean.
Oh, okay.
It's a luxury cruise ship. Jose Busto in San Juan, Puerto Rico, was a very integral part of the Caribbean operation and would clear the CIA involved people such as myself, where the legitimate immigrations or legitimate customs inspections were circumvented so that he could actually get the drugs taken off the ship through the cargo area instead, so that they would be undetected.
There was cover-up for everybody was taking part of that.
Very much. NCL was completely, totally involved in the drug operations at that time. Then the drugs were transferred onto the motorhome that Alex Houston and I had driven down to the cruise ship, while we were on our cruise. We would then take the money that had been...
So you went with that particular vehicle to the ship inside, or you just take these drugs and all in this track? How you describe that? How you had the drugs in that motor vehicle, right? In that.
The suitcase that carried the money was exchanged for suitcases full of drugs, or the drugs were sometimes transferred on in these big food storage bins of the cruise line. But once we arrived back in port in Florida, the drugs were then transferred to the motorhome. The motorhome had been specifically made where it had hollow walls for holding the drugs. The drugs were then put into the walls of the motorhome and driven back into either Nashville, Tennessee, the drug drop in Ohio that I mentioned earlier, the drug drop in Kentucky, Diamond Cavern that I mentioned earlier, or possibly to different military bases along the way.
I see. So now the other names that you're mentioning in this list, who they are? You mentioned also somehow Saddam Hussein there. In which respect?
Yes, that was Saddam Hussein was mentioned, and that was more from being considered a stepping stone of the New World Order. He was considered expendable. He was set up. The whole Desert Storm war, from what I was privy to, what I was aware of, was simply a setup. As a matter of fact, I had delivered a message to Saudi Arabian King Fahd that the arming of Iraq was just a, quote, mirage in the whirlwind, where
which year are you talking about?
That Saddam Hussein would be stopped eventually.
Which year are you talking about?
This was in 1986, I believe.
86.
86. They were already arming Iraq with biological warfare weaponry, and that was what I was aware of in particular.
But the purpose was to attack Iran, I presume, right, at the time? Or?
At the time, in the arming of Iraq, it was so that Saddam Hussein would continue, according to George Bush, what I heard George Bush say.
When you heard him saying that?
At Bohemian Grove, right about that same period of time. When I saw him there, he was discussing how Saddam Hussein should be allowed to continue genocide in his country, so that there would be, quote, that much less for Bush to have to annihilate when the war was actually broke out. And in the meantime, Saudi Arabian King Fahd was being soothed and to understand that the building of Iraq was not going to affect Saudi Arabia directly, supposedly, was not going to affect them directly or be a threat to them because Saddam Hussein was destined to be disarmed. The war was imminent. And this was, back in the late 80s that all this was already established. So when Desert Storm actually came about, it was, it didn't seem like war as the public perceived it at all to me. It was so staged. It was so orchestrated. But Saddam Hussein was definitely considered an expendable. Baby Doc Duvalier of Haiti was also considered an expendable. They used Haiti as a cocaine hub for many years before that particular aspect of the cocaine.
Did you have met Baby Doc?
On numerous occasions.
Where was the first time that you met with him?
I met with him in Haiti at his presidential palace in Port-au-Prince. And
who brought you there?
Alex Houston.
You flew there, right?
Through the Norwegian Caribbean line.
Oh, you went with the crew there.
Right. Many drug transactions had occurred there before Baby Doc was taken out of power. When Baby Doc was taken out of power, I was aware of Haiti being used as a prototype of mass genocide for the New World Order, according to New World Order plans, and was...
In which respect mass genocide? Through the civil wars or through the conflict among the nation in this country or various groups, or how you understood that genocide aspect of the New World Order?
Through AIDS, mind control of the masses,
What do you mean by AIDS? Do you mean AIDS was implanted there, or?
By everything that I know, and it is detailed in the book, it was deliberately brought into Haiti to, as George Bush said, this was to quote him only, he said to annihilate the niggers at their source.
Mm-hmm.
And in other words...
there was also in Bohemian Grove?
Yes.
What was
and
Bohemian
he was
Grove?
also referring to South Africa at that time.
What does the Bohemian Grove actually role in that whole story? I read your book, but Bohemian Grove was a place where all these people belonging to this club attending. Are they all members of the Rose, or one way or another, or just some of them?
No. There's Bohemian Grove was a political playground in Northern California, and it's still there today. It's not far from the Presidio, where the so-called Gorbachev USA summit was held. The people that met at Bohemian Grove had two levels that, according to my understanding, one level was the usual membership. The other level was the elite, politically affluent members of the Grove, which included George Bush, Bill and Bob Bennett, Gerald Ford, to name a few, Ronald Reagan.
Kissinger as well?
I understand that Kissinger is a member, but it was not my experience to have contact with him there. It was my experience to have contact with Dick Cheney.
Do you have any knowledge of this operation when Gorbachev was there? There was also some kind of conversation you heard between Bush referring to Gorbachev and all this operation to do Russia, to cut off Russian Union, or to convince Gorbachev on that?
The only aspect of it that I was aware of at all, as far as Gorbachev and that effort, was just a shared goal of implementing the New World Order. I do not know the details. I'm not privy to that aspect of it because my operations were limited primarily to Canada, Mexico, Caribbean.
So you never have a chance to see when Gorbachev was there or anything like that?
No, I was free at that time. I was no longer a mind-controlled slave. It was no longer operational.
Oh, I see.
But the Presidio is a well-known abuse base. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino has been charged with sexual abuse of children there for the proliferation of his occult temple of Set, for the blood ritual traumas that occur there. I was taken there for mind control programming purposes. There's a mind control sophisticated technology part building that's located on the Presidio. And the Presidio, like I said, is in close proximity to the Bohemian Grove. So it all kind of intertangles. The same people are involved in both places.
Can you give me some more detail about these names that you have there, like drug dealers and drug traffickers and slaves? You have quite a list there.
Yes.
Other pages, I believe.
Boxcar Willie is a country music entertainer. George Bush Jr. is listed for his operation.
Do you have a knowledge you met with him?
Yes.
Who was the man? How do you describe this man?
George Bush Jr. Took Kelly off on several occasions.
You mean sexually abused her?
From all indications that I saw when Kelly was returned, I would have to say yes. For his support of his father's sexual assault of Kelly, yes. George Bush Jr. was covering for his father.
What is his second name, first name of George Bush Jr.? Also George Bush Jr.,
yes.
Right? He's now, what is his position now?
I believe he's governor of Texas.
Oh, I see.
At this point.
I see.
But when I knew him, he was, this was back in 1986. He was at the Mount Shasta compound. He was also at Ronald Reagan's, I don't know if it's a primary home or a second home or whatever, but it's a home in California that I was...
You met with him?
Yes.
Do you have anything, any relation sexual whatsoever with him, or?
None whatsoever, and no indicators that he was interested in any kind of sexual relations. The only interest that I ever saw him show was towards my daughter. I did not witness him sexually assaulting my daughter.
Did you witness anyone? Did you witness? Ever been eyewitness of any of assault of your daughter by you know that you saw by your eyes? You saw with your eyes?
Yes.
When it's happened and how it's happened?
That was after Kelly and I had been caught in the most dangerous game on Mount Shasta, and were taken into the hunting lodge, cabin, whatever you'd want to call it.
That was in California, or?
Yes, in Northern California. And Dick Cheney and George Bush were on vacation, so kind of a work vacation at the time, because it was close to the Christmas holidays and they were off work. George Bush was using copious quantities of heroin that I witnessed him using.
He was using heroin?
Heroin, yes.
Which way? Through the needle? Or?
Yes. There was also opium that was smoked in that room. There was...
Who, Cheney was with him?
Yes, yes. And
which room? Can you describe the room and the place?
The room was, it was set up like redwood walls, and it was very rustic. The whole room was set up in a mirrored type illusion, where everything, like there was a sofa facing a sofa. They were both black leather, and they looked exactly the same, and they were facing each other. Two armchairs were positioned opposite each other, so that it appeared to be, in looking in the room, the whole room appeared to be a mirror reflection, but it was simply actually designed that way. Because, like, George Bush was sitting in one chair and Dick Cheney was sitting in the other.
They were naked?
When Kelly and I were brought in.
They were naked? Or?
Eventually, yes. When we first came in, no. But they did both unzip their pants and were making lewd remarks to Kelly and I both. Both of them were very high on the heroin and the drugs that were there. It was their recreational drugs of choice, and they were very abusive of Kelly and I both.
So what they did exactly? Just they did oral sex, or they just penetrate you sexually?
George Bush, after a series of perverse and lewd comments and events, had gotten up and walked over to Kelly and had put his penis in her mouth momentarily, and then he took her off to another room, which was nearby. It was a bedroom that was right off this room, and from that bedroom I heard Kelly hollering in pain. George Bush had made comments to Dick Cheney at that time.
From that room.
He liked it when children felt the pain and squirmed and hollered. And then I heard that going on, while at the same time Dick Cheney had taken me down in front of the fireplace. There was a fireplace in the room, and had sexual intercourse with me there that was extremely brutal, because of his abnormally large penis size, but also because
what kind of penis size? He has like very big penis there, or?
Yeah, very, very large, very thick. The complete opposite end of the scale of Senator Byrd, that's for sure. Very brutal in his sexual assault. He's aware of his size being painful, and he would dislocate my jaw to sexually gratify himself in my throat. and he would actually slide my jaw out of joint, and I have permanent damage to my jaw from Dick Cheney's sexual assault alone because of his unusual size. So that was a very traumatic event. The whole thing was horrible enough to have actually shattered some programming that I had at that time, and I had to be reprogrammed at the Presidio following that traumatic event. As we drove from the Lake Shasta area that we had driven to, we were taken by helicopter to Mount Shasta. So when this was over, we were transported again by helicopter back to Lake Shasta where the motorhome was. And at that time, Kelly was literally dying. She was unable to breathe. She was running a very high temperature. She couldn't move. Her kidneys and her whole back were hurt from George Bush's sexual assault.
Thank you. Friend, and I believe friend to life, and Mark, and I'm very sorry to ask you these questions, and I feel even the first time we met very unpleasant about that, but this is a part of my trial to explain and to people that have skepticism about all these things, all this trauma. How you describe this trauma that happened to you? How they've been working and experimentizing on you? What is the size they've been using? Can you give us some more guideline on that?
On how they perform different...
How they perform different trauma on you from the beginning?
There was sleep, food, and water deprivation that usually occurred for 3 days prior to any particular programming session or any particular operation that I had to carry out. The water deprivation was especially difficult, especially in the Caribbean or any hot places.
Which places, when you talk about that, if you'd be so kind, I know that you have a problem with remembering everything, but just tell us which places you're referring
the Caribbean?
to. Yes.
Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. There was what it was called an out island for NCL. It's a small, remote island, not too far from the Bahamas and not too far from Key West. This little island was really the most active drug operation. I saw Noriega at that island. It's also got the radio control towers for airplanes for the drug operations. It's got radio control for the ships, so that if there was anything really significant going on a different island, they could actually detour the ship for whatever reason, excuse they gave, bad weather, whatever, to go to those other islands, because the main purpose of NCL was the C.I.A. Cocaine operation. So they had that one little out island, and it was called Stirrup Cay.
When you can recall the beginning of your torture as a child, I presume, and when was that, if you can recall it, and how that was performed? Can you give us some kind of, completely analysis from the beginning of your torture, time that you can recall?
There's,
except the fact that she was abused by your father.
Yeah, the sexual abuse, of course. And then I witnessed a murder by my father when I was about 3 years old. That was, there was no way to really understand all about death even then to me. I was so small. But it was very traumatic just the same, because the man was shot. He had stumbled onto our camp while we were camping out on the high banks near Muskegon, Michigan. And it was hunting season, and he was a hunter. And he had happened to stumble onto our camp while my father was passing us kids around the campfire to my other uncles who were also sexually abusing us.
So in other words, your father was having sex with you and
Yes.
your brother?
Yes, when this guy happened to accidentally stumble onto the campsite. Mm-hmm. And when he realized what he saw, he turned to run, and my father shot him.
Was your father ever prosecuted for that?
No, not at all. Not at all. There was no problems that arose from that I was ever aware of at all. it certainly created more problems in my mind. So that was very traumatic. There were numerous traumas like that and like my daughter's abuse that were especially difficult psychological traumas to deal with. The psychological traumas are far more devastating than physical trauma. To me, I have no fear now. I was asked one time by a customs agent, he said, "Aren't you afraid they'll get you and torture you now?" I said, I'm not afraid of that at all, because I know how far torture goes. It only goes so far, and then it doesn't matter anymore. Physical torture just, I know what the experience is like and how far it goes. My body still bears a lot of scars from the physical tortures. The stun gun has left moles and prod marks in my skin, on my back, and my arms, and my legs. My head has been caved in. The skull is...
Who was performing that on you?
Different people were using the stun guns, sometimes Secret Service, sometimes, especially Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino, Philip Habib, Alex...
Who was Philip Habib?
Philip Habib was Reagan's attaché. He was some kind of international diplomat. I don't fully understand exactly what his operations were, although I know what his agenda was, and it was New World Order. So there were quite a few people that used...
I'm sorry. Now, talking about this torture, Mark, you have one of the weapon that Kelly described before. Can you tell us more? And Kelly, can you tell me how they use this on you?
Well, this is one variety. There are many varieties of these things. Uses usually a 9-volt battery and converts it from 100 to 210,000 volts DC current. It's quite powerful. You can see the blue spark there.
Mm-hmm.
And what it does is it instantly constricts all your muscles in your body to where you have no ability to holler, to make a noise. All you do is go straight to the ground. Mm-hmm. Or if it's done very quickly, you'll see like a flash of light in behind your eyes.
How did it affect you, Kelly? How they performed this on you? It was the same thing they've been using on you?
Yes, that's one example of it. There's another cylindrical kind that was used internally. It was a vaginal prod that was, I think, a lower voltage, so I was more aware or could feel the pain of it, whereas if I was hit with a higher voltage stun gun, it usually was a matter of things going black and, and going down.
This creates flu-like symptoms. You get, after about 10 seconds of administering this, what you wind up having is someone who is usually constricted on the ground. They're disoriented. They do not know where they are. They don't know what time of day it is. They don't know anything because their brain sugar has instantly been reduced to the point to where they're delirious. If you hold it on much longer than 20 seconds, all you're going to do is the person is going to be out for several minutes. And when they do recover, their mobility is impaired to the point to where they can't fight, run, do much of anything.
My other question is to you, pointed out, Mark, one of the people asked me a question, one of the editors, why you don't publish your book by some publisher.
Well,
it was a very interesting question that I would like you to have today respond. I could not get the answer because we didn't know each other so much. I believe your story from the beginning, and I would like to have this answer from you.
In the United States, there are laws which protect so-called freedom of speech, particularly if you are a party to an action. And since I was a party to this action, And since I had been threatened, and the threats had been documented, the threats coming from the federal government or representatives of the United States government, it made me a party to the action of exposing this atrocity. Had I permitted someone else to publish the book, and we had many publishers that were willing to publish it and pay us well for publishing it, I would have lost the ability to have maintained the content of the book itself, and I would also have lost the book itself. There have been several people to publish books similar to what Cathy and I have published, and the CIA just simply comes in and buys the rights and buys
probably to cover up people,
and literally removes them from the shelves of the bookstores, and that's the end of it. There's no more available.
So your aspect was not exactly to make money, to make sensation out of it, and that's the reason that I felt you both to be in the very same, because my motive is to expose that mind control operation of humans as something very dangerous, something has to be punished all over the world through the media, and I will do my best in my effort to do so. But I'm very glad to hear that kind of answer from you, that you are not particularly, gain was to get money out of it and to be a rich man and to get out of it.
At several points in the past 8 years, Cathy and I could have sold our story, and if we agreed to be silenced, we could have sold it, and she would have had enough money to have lived off of the rest of her life, and I could have recovered my life. I invested more in this than anyone would be willing to pay me, frankly, because I was willing to do it, and I did it willingly. But there's no amount of money that can silence us. That's absurd. It can't happen.
Another aspect that I noticed is, as a man who is following now, we became friends, and I'm really very much listening. You and I really appreciate your company. Was the way how you met together, and the way that you simply dedicated your future life to something that you didn't know about, and what will be happen out of it, something that is very dangerous, but your probably inside soul and instinct tells you that maybe that is your dedication to the humanity, that you somehow to your previous job didn't get as satisfactory, I believe.
Well, as you know, during the late 60s and early 70s, I was exposed to, as a United States Department of Defense subcontractor, I was exposed to some MK Ultra or mind control experimentation, legitimate experimentation that didn't involve torture. It did not involve any sort of trauma. It was more in line with rehabilitating criminals and people involved in mental institution settings, also with apes and dolphins. Behavioral modification programs is actually what they were entitled. But what I learned from those experiences and from what my own research led me to believe was that mind control, or external control of the mind, was perhaps the greatest threat to mankind's survival. Certainly it's the last freedom that we have that is not currently being encumbered on a mass scale. It is encumbered on individual scales, like Cathy is telling you. But when presented with the opportunity, and I look at it as an opportunity book, to actually make a positive difference, I found no alternative. There wasn't a choice. Had there been a choice, logically, I would not have done what I did. But there was no choice. The choice was very simple: to rescue Cathy and Kelly and to get this information into the public's ear. I just didn't realize it would take me so long to accomplish this goal.
There were so many government secrets and personal reputations staked on the belief that I couldn't be deprogrammed, and I know I'm extremely fortunate to have survived all of this. But they were wrong in believing that, because they made that belief predicated on their own immoral thought processes, and they're limited in their thinking by their own immorality. They never considered that someone like Mark would use the information that he had for good, to actually help to help not only me, but to help humanity. But I think the most, if there's a happy ending to this story personally, it would be that we have fallen in love, and the love factor has been very significant in my recovery, because not only did he save my life, but I have certainly have a reason to live it. And the love factor is extremely important. I feel like most people spend their lifetime looking for a love and never find it. And at 38 now, I've got that love, and that's
your emotions
very
back and the feeling.
Right.
See, when I was talking to some people, I even described, I was telling a little bit of my expressions. I said, this is like a Pygmalion story in a way. Professor and, remember Pygmalion story, My Fair Lady? But in different frame and picture, in different time. I really appreciated very much the way you described me in the situations. So can you actually describe me the way you met for the first time and how everything happened? And
first of all, I need to apply just a little bit of history. I had a business with the People's Republic of China and the Chinese military. We were involved in a joint venture company to manufacture large capacitor banks that were used in energy savings for the mining industry. The mining industry was having to shut down every other day because of a lack of electricity. And the mining industry, of course, was controlled by the military over there because it was metal. They have a rather odd arrangement on how they control certain things. But as a result of my agreement, joint venture contracts with the People's Republic of China and the military, they were very concerned about who my business partners were, apparently. And Alex Houston, Cathy O'Brien's handler back in the States, was in fact a business partner of mine. Was a business partner of mine, and actually was one of the people that was instrumental in helping me put this company together. I was told by the Chinese intelligence, I was approached by them after the signing of the contract, that I had a partner in the United States, Alex Houston, who was involved in drug trafficking, child and adult prostitution, pornography, money laundering, and it was working for the C.I.A. And it was sanctioned by the White House, meaning at the highest level.
Which hotel was that? In China? In which place? In China, you remember?
I have the pictures. I'm not sure. Yes, I am too. It was called the International Hotel in Beijing, is where actually this meeting took place. A secondary meeting took place at a facility in the Shenzhen province in southern China. But the Chinese offered to provide me the funding to buy Alex Houston out, which they provided it. Not only did they give me a $1 million letter of credit through BCCI in New York, but they also provided me with cash to purchase Alex Houston stock. I returned to the United States. I bought Alex Houston stock. I contacted a general friend of mine because of the words mind control being introduced into all this conversation that I'd had with the Chinese intelligence officer. And I explained to him what I was up against, and he told me that mind control, as I knew it from the 60s and 70s research, was fully operational and was saturating the private sector. In other words, the civilians were being abused with it. Well, it was at that point...
It was your friend from C.I.A. who told you that?
Actually, yes, he was C.I.A., but he was also a high-ranking military official in military intelligence. His connection to the C.I.A. at that time, I was not aware of. I've only recently learned that he had C.I.A. connections. He was U.S. military intelligence, which is a separate thing. But this gentleman had tried to convince me that people like Cathy were not helpable, that there was no help available for them. and that once I got her and her daughter out of there, I would just have two insane people on my hands, and I could not have possibly help them, even with the knowledge that I'd acquired on this topic. But fortunately, this friend was wrong, because he put me in touch with some other people within U.S. military intelligence who were very cooperative in giving me the information I needed to not only get her out, but also to help put her back together. And
so they've been also
very
engaged in this operation, and
Yes.
They knew the technologies and the programming in a way.
Yes, sir. And that's what they provided me as far as the tools to work with. And after working with Cathy about 9 months in Alaska, she had reached a point to where she was not dissociating or going into any sort of trance. She was quite competent, and I felt could withstand the rigors of cross-examination by the federal authorities. So at that point in time, we began in earnest reporting what she had experienced with the proofs that we were able to acquire, which were very limited at that time, and the documents and testimony, which was extremely limited, just to what really I was able to acquire over a few-month period of time. We began to supply that to every single law enforcement agency in the United States that could impact this case, to get it before the people necessary to have it properly investigated and have these perpetrators charged. But we were stopped for reasons of national security. Now, the bad guys, or the perpetrators, the ones who abused she and her daughter and so many others, are hiding behind the 1947 National Securities Act. The National Security Act is not a necessary provision in our protection of government secrets. We had the rules of ethical military conduct, which protected our nation's secrets since its beginning, and it was quite adequate. What this National Securities Act does, Boog, is that it protects perpetrators at the highest level for any activity. They can do anything. They can run drugs for money. They can have secret parts of the government that they're funding with drugs and other illicit profits. And it's all done under the guise of national security, and there's nothing that a citizen can do as far as getting it into court.
At this point, we keep raising the question in Kelly's case, what does national security have to do with the rape and molestation of a child? Because Kelly has been literally a political prisoner in the custody of the state of Tennessee. She's denied rehabilitation due to the political prominence of her C.I.A. and K.Ultra abusers. She's waiting for the peace of mind that I know comes with recovery. She's waiting for the day that she'll be free to be herself, and that she'll be free of this blanket of national security that's been allowing for the proliferation of the violation of laws and rights in her case that are, it's absolutely intolerable, and it's blatant. She's been a political prisoner for over 5 years, and we're looking forward to the day when we can get the information out on a wide enough scale that Kelly can actually be helped.
Do you believe that I'm very happy and delightful that tomorrow we're going to meet Kelly, and that we'll be able to talk to her, and you told her that I'm coming, and I believe that we'll have a nice time bringing her for the first time out of this facility.
Yes.
Do you believe, Mark and Cathy, that there is some help for her, that someone will be able, with full knowledge of that destructive technology of controlling of human minds, to work out also with Kelly, even if she was exposed to the project?
There's no technology available in the private sector. Civilians have not been given that technology. In other words, the psychiatrists and the psychologists that are in this country and abroad, I don't know of any of them that have access to the technology that is required, that I'm aware of, to help Kelly.
What is the major difference between Cathy's case and Kelly's case?
It's the amount of scarring on the brainstem that occurred prior to age 5. Cathy was abused sexually, physically, and psychologically, and behaviorally but Kelly was abused through the use of technology and chemicals. Kelly's abuse goes much more pronounced. The brain damage is much more extensive, and Kelly has a wonderful chance for recovery. A wonderful chance.
She's extremely intelligent, for one.
If in fact we can force this government to at least, and this is what all of this is about, to at least release the equipment that I know is available that would put that child back together so that she could be a normally functioning adult.
In the meantime, we've nurtured her on a soul level, at the very essence of her being, with love, understanding, and compassion, and also been able to give her an insight and understanding of herself and why she's in the situation that she is, rather than recovered, because her own desire to recover, her own she's so motivated inside to recover that if that could have done it, she'd be there. But she doesn't know why she wasn't able to bring herself to that point. That's not fair that she should even have to think that way. So we hope to get access to some kind of technology that will actually help her stay in control of herself. She says that she longs for the day that she can express herself as she knows she is inside. And it's
Are you definitely positive that there's no access to any more penetration of any kind of influence on her, due to the fact that she could be a very dangerous witness to the much more extensive cover-up on her case?
Actually, there is no guarantees. Not for Kelly, not for me, or Cathy, or for that matter, you. Mm-hmm. But with as much publicity as this case has been given over the past 5 years through law enforcement, legitimate law enforcement, and legitimate mental health in this country and abroad, I would say that the chances of them abusing Kelly at this point are slim to none. It would not be practical. It would be a big red flag.
I was also facing the different questions, so maybe it's very interesting for you to open my heart and to tell you what kind of question I got when I was playing the tape that you gave me and all these books. For the people that have been very superficially facing that, I mean, that means not reading your book or not even being capable from the time point of you to read that, they always thought that should be something that Americans are planning on us, in a way, even in Europe, in Western Europe. But from the others, they asked me, people that are more concerned and they have some knowledge on that, and especially in this field is not only in the United States, the field is probably in Russia, very developed.
Oh, yeah.
In all these
we don't know
fascistic regimes
in the world that is not employing the same type of mind control that Cathy experienced. There's no country in the world that's excluded, and that even goes into some of the most the third world primitive societies in Africa.
and such as Haiti.
And Haiti,
Also kind of mind control,
same
trauma. So now most people say how you're still alive, how knowing the fact how C.I.A. is effective, and as a matter of fact how easy. I was facing a situation in my lifetime when I was working on football. I'm probably the most dangerous espionage affair in the world by now, of being threatened and being even tortured one time, and lucky enough I survived that torture. But on the way, knowing such methodology of killing, to kill the person, to eliminate the person, you just need a few experts on that. What kept you alive through these years?
Probably the single greatest support that we received were from friendships that I have maintained over the years within the intelligence community and within law enforcement. These people have guided my path and Cathy's path safely through this maze of information dissemination. We have disseminated information. We know what kind of secrets to keep and what not to keep. We know what will get you killed and what you can survive with. We have literally passed through the window of opportunities And we have successfully gotten this information out in such mass that now, quite honestly, I believe that we're probably safer than most Americans who don't even know about this stuff. I don't feel that we are threatened.
For most of the people that I met, publisher, people from magazines, they ask me questions. Okay, we will publish if it's only a matter of mind control, which people are aware of one way through Satanism and other means, but how we can comprehend child abuse with a very famous name in politics.
It's very simple, Luke. There's one common denominator between a child abuser and one who isn't a child abuser. That common denominator is they're both people. And when people are in positions of absolute power, you know that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And sometimes even the most mild-mannered, unperverted person, when they are placed in positions of extreme authority, under extreme pressure, and they develop some very sociopathic attitudes towards their fellow man. And in the process of doing so, express themselves sexually in a very perverted way. Now, this is common knowledge among people who study the mind, psychologists, psychiatrists, and mental health people. They realize that the higher up the ladder of success someone rises, the more perverted their sexuality becomes, and the more criminal-minded they become. This has been known throughout history. So to say that because this person is a famous politician or an entertainer or a musician, it does not make them exempt from perverted behavior. As a matter of fact, it accelerates it. And this is a matter of human nature. So in the past, you know, rock stars, if they were all arrested for drug use, there wouldn't be any rock stars. I mean, there wouldn't be any rock and roll because they'd all be locked up. So why aren't they locked up when they use this stuff openly? Everybody knows they use it. They use it because they buy it. So that means they're buying it, they're selling it, they're using it, and they don't go to prison. It's because of society accepts it. But they will not accept someone sitting in the audience using it while they're watching these rock stars use it. Politicians, on the other hand, pass laws to have perverted persons locked up. But they themselves are practicing the perversions, and they are above the law because they have placed themselves that way. So that's really the only answer that I can think of logically to answer your question.
Other means that other questions I was asking you, there's other question was asked from the people that I was showing the film to, was what is the perspective of majority of Americans? Are they aware that they came to the stage of very strange situation, which we know as Orwell 84 book, by Orwell book 84, as total control? You know, we was having a lot of films on that, and it's
right.
Hollywood industry is full of those films. How do you think, because you have access to reality, you have access to be with Cathy, who was actually one of those robots that we was watching even in Hollywood by the time. What is your opinion about this country, where this country is going? Is that phenomena scaring a lot of people in this country?
George Orwell, in 1949, gave us some pretty grim predictions based on some theories that he had developed based on some technology that he knew that were being developed. George Orwell had connections into the intelligence community, both British MI6 as well as C.I.A. In those days, it was the OSS. George Orwell, when he wrote his books, many of them, he predicted a society which would, through natural evolution, be controlled through its own technology. Secret knowledge equals power. And when you have secret knowledge, technologically speaking, you can control whomever. For instance, the United States is in control of the world at this time due to its technology advancements. Now, technology has a way of not being a tameable or protectable asset. As a matter of fact, more espionage is committed in search of technological secrets than any other single piece of secret knowledge or information that any government or corporation can contain. So secret knowledge is very, very important for control. We as a people are not, as an average American person, are not aware that the government is about 25 to 30 years ahead of us, technologically speaking. Now, Book, I ask you, the camera that you're working with right now was not even thought of 25 years ago, much less available. So technology, if you removed everything from your life that was not in existence 25 years ago, you would practically remove everything that you have, including some of your clothing, because of technology. Man has got to evolve through this technological breakthrough. We will defy what George Orwell predicted, and which has come true. Big Brother is, in fact, watching us all, but through the use of technology. But mankind will and must evolve through it, or mankind will fail as a species.
From my perspective, people tend to pick and choose what they want to believe of my victimization predicated on their own experience. And in the last 5 years, people can relate to it more because it is their experience. More and more people are affected in some aspect by mind control. They're affected by someone, a loved one that's in special forces with the military, or someone who has been affected by occultism and blood trauma and mind control through that. There's people affected through child abuse scandals that are not seeing any justice in this country. There's people that are most widely affected through the global education process that's been implemented in the school system. That's where the education system has been changed and designed to increase the children's learning capacity while decreasing their ability to critically analyze. It's making them robotic. They come home to their parents as children that their parents don't even recognize anymore. They don't know who those children are.
It's like the young man who goes off and is recruited by the military and then is put into a special forces training, and he comes back and he has no memory of any of his personal life. His parents barely recognize his persona, and his loved ones no longer even know who he is.
Now, this isn't to say that global education is the kind of experience that I had.
No.
My experience was extreme, and I was totally robotic. These kids are coming out of school in a slightly robotic state. They're coming out with a completely different attitude towards life. So there's like a sliding scale of mind control, but nevertheless, more and more people in this country are affected in one way or another. So they are wide open to that reality. Plus, with the erosion of our constitutional values, with our country having been just completely eroded morally and financially, people are opening their eyes a little bit. They're beginning to ask questions and demand answers as to what went on. So they're more ready to accept the information.
Our government has created total chaos in this country by flooding the streets with drugs. Drugs that are addictive, drugs that are debilitating, and drugs that will capture all of the not only disposable incomes of the lower class, middle class, upper class, but also their entire life savings.
And they know that the C.I.A. is involved in the drug industry. I don't know anybody that doesn't know that in this country. The average drug dealer on the streets, just kids, know that if they're not part of C.I.A. operations, they're going to get busted. So that's the word on in the slums to the kids that are selling drugs on the street corners. So people are aware that there's a big problem in this country.
So what kind of society is a society between slaves and mustard, or which way are we going to? which way this government is
Take a
bringing...
look back in history and see what Adolf Hitler's vision was for his New World Order, and that's exactly what we're headed into.
Unless we get the information out. The only defense against mind control is knowledge. They have been operating on the idea that secret knowledge equals power, and in fact that has been true. We need to tell those secrets. That's why Mark and I have written the book. That's why we're getting the information out. That's why we have so many behind us dedicated to getting this information out. People have a right to know and a need to know this information for the sake of humanity as we know it.
How about you appeared in a lot of, how many talk shows you're appearing with, and how many conference you was appearing with?
Book, I don't have an exact figure. I can guesstimate from the number of years and the number of stops, and just by a drawer full of canceled airline tickets, probably 150 personal appearances, and probably
With Cathy together, right?
oh, always. And probably twice that many radio and television shows, both in the United States and Canada.
And when the television shows will be taking place now? Television shows?
The TV shots were usually limited to news people coming in to seminars and taking 5-minute, 2-minute, 1-minute film clips of what we were talking about. We have done a couple of on-camera interviews with some people, investigative reporters, and those have been aired in various markets. We did one 4-hour segment for a Christian broadcast group, which was aired in 30-minute increments, 8 shows.
You have this on tape here? You have this tape?
Actually, I can get it. The master I have here, I copied it so many times, it's finished. It's a lousy interview.
Okay.
I'm not pleased with it. It was back in the early days where I was unable to say some of the things that we wanted to say because we did not have hard proof or hard testimony, corroborating testimony.
And the media is so controlled and censored. We've had to do this.
Oh, yeah.
We've had to do this a difficult way, making copies and getting information out. And now that we've got the book, at least it's an easier, more comprehensive vehicle for getting the information out.
How many of you was together with 60 Minutes once, and they were doing a story? What's happened with that segment and how the situation was looking like?
That segment was filmed in California, videotaped, and the interviewer, with tears in his eyes, told Cathy that someday her story will be told, but not now. In other words, and off camera, I asked him, I said, where is this tape going? He said, it's going back to 60 Minutes. I said, who is it for? He said, why? I said, who is it for? He said, it's for the C.I.A. They want to see what you're talking about.
A very similar experience. Talking about 60 Minutes, I was sent to 60 Minutes to the very distinguished gentleman that I respect, David Weiner of New York Times, who discovered a very similar self-inflicted terrorist act by the Muslim in Sarajevo, which was used as pretext for bombing of the service, even that everybody knew that was not done by that. But I was also in 60 Minutes. I was with Don Hewitt, walking legend of American journalism. I was showing to his producer, one of them was Jeff Fegger, who I mentioned in one of the film, which was actually airing to them as maybe last honest story about American journalism, was a story about Kuwaiti's daughter, Kuwaiti ambassador, who was 1 month pretending to be a witness from the Kuwait, and how kids were killed, and Bush was, even knowing the fact that she was daughter of Kuwaiti ambassador, quoting her statements. Don Hewitt went for half an hour to inform himself from CIA. He came back and he said, your story is right. I cannot air your story because they will damage the whole industry of media. They will damage the whole thing. So I'm very sorry. That is the biggest challenge I ever had. It's the biggest conspiracy that I heard of. But I'm sorry I cannot make it. End of discussion. So I understand that some topics will never, but I hope that this topic will be very soon aired in the future and they will do something about that.
Well, it's happening now. As I mentioned earlier, we've had more press, good, solid press, interested in what we're talking about in the last 5 months than we've had in the last 8 years. And we are, in fact, winning.
I think it's the people's demand for answers that's causing the medias to start coming around, because people have gone totally to alternative medias, the radio and shortwave, and what they call underground newspapers and things like that, which are, in essence, patriot newspapers. But there's so many people, the majority of the people are turning to the alternative medias to the point where the mainstream media is going to have to just get with it now or lose out entirely. I mean, it's just time for it to turn around. The demand of the people has risen to that proportion in this country.
Exactly.
So you're planning also, I was told that, what you can tell me about this global education order? What is this all about and how you understand it? We didn't have, or we're not aware of that in Europe for the time being.
Makes me wonder if it's under a different name. There's a lot of different names it's used in this country, in Canada and Mexico that I'm aware of. The Global Education 2000, Goals 2000. In this country, it's referred to as America 2000, outcome-based education. So there's a lot of different names. But in essence, it's a form of teaching that is
Method of teaching.
A method of teaching through computers and headphones that affects the subconscious more directly.
The same stuff we were working on in the 60s and 70s for NASA, so that astronauts could remember everything that they saw while in space. Some of those same principles are being applied in our schools using simple computers. Back in those days, though, they didn't have simple computers. They were quite elaborate. It would fill a room with equipment now you can have on your lap.
So what is the philosophy behind, also on the control of the masses, or what is global education? What
It is an absolute control of the masses and supposedly a control on the gross national product. The productivity of these children when they emerge as adults and are going to be in a work environment. It's a very easy way to put them into certain classifications very quickly, very simply, and everybody does the same job that they're assigned supposedly much more efficiently. There seems to be a tremendous amount of questions of whether or not that could actually happen. In some areas, I can assure you that efficiency does go up, but creativity goes down. And our species, our human species, has evolved because of its ability to become creative. Once our creativity is stifled, then we will be plunged into a dark ages that would, I suppose, rival anything in history. So we're on the threshold for that now, Bruce.
When I was forced to work under Secretary of Education Bill Bennett during the Reagan administration, I was forced to deliver a message to the state governors at a convention that was being held. And this particular message included the idea that they could control the future by controlling the children, and that by controlling the information that the children learned, and in other words, adjusting history to fit their own agenda, that they could actually be affecting the future. And in essence, I suppose that that's true, that children are our future.
But how you explain the phenomena, how many people that you believe and how many programs of mind control are existing now, and how many people that you know that were together with you? You was also mentioning School of Charm, something like that.
Yes, there's the Charm School where the sex slaves in particular were taken through, and there were a half dozen to a dozen girls going through at a time for a 3-day course. And there were so many